Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was half Saiyan in MHA world? Part 1. This story is Saiyan's Echo by Cheetox 2. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and use the hype feature as it helps to reach more MHA fans. Now let's get to the story. The afternoon sun bled gold across the rooftops of Musudafu, casting long, warm shadows that danced through the half-open window of Izuku Midoriya's modest bedroom. The room was quiet, except for the soft flicker of the television playing highlights from the USJ rescue incident on low volume, and the occasional rustle of papers as Izuku flipped through his hero notebook, his mind anything but calm. He sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes not on the screen or the words scribbled across the pages, but on his open palm. A tiny, flickering orb of golden energy hovered just above it. It pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat, his heartbeat. It wasn't one for all. He knew the difference. He felt the difference. One for all crackled like lightning in his limbs, wild and volatile, barely contained even after months of training. But this energy was warmer, calmer, ancient. It didn't feel like something he had inherited. It felt like something that had always been there, hidden, waiting. He closed his fingers and the light winked out like a snuffed candle. Again, he whispered. This time, he didn't try to force it like he did with his quirk. He just breathed. The energy responded like a whisper from within. It flowed through him, down to his fingertips, swirling around his arm in an ethereal golden glow. It felt natural, almost familiar. Images flashed through his mind, unreal images. A planet exploding in slow motion. A man with spiked black hair screaming as his aura erupted, tearing the very ground beneath him apart. A child, a baby, nestled inside a space pod, eyes wide with confusion as the stars streaked past the glass. Izuku gasped, the glow vanishing as his concentration snapped. What was that? He muttered, heart racing. He clutched his chest as if to physically hold onto the memory before it faded again. These visions, they weren't dreams. They didn't feel made up. They felt real, like fragments of a past life, or something buried deep inside him. Ever since the USJ attack, these strange visions had become more frequent. The adrenaline from the villain encounter, the close brush with death, maybe even the way he'd pushed one for all beyond his limit, it had all unlocked something. Something old, something powerful. The door creaked open slightly, and his mom's voice called from the hallway. Izuku, I'll be back late from work. There's katsudon in the fridge, sweetie. Okay, Mom, he shouted back, trying to mask the tension in his voice. As the door clicked shut again, he stood, walking to the mirror. His reflection stared back at him. Green hair messy as always, freckles dotting his cheeks, eyes still too big for his face. But now, there was something else. He tilted his head, his irises flickered for the briefest moment, golden. There was a power inside him that didn't come from All Might. Didn't come from Earth. He was something else, something more, and he was terrified. Yet, deep inside that fear, something stirred. Not just power, pride. Izuku clenched his fists. I have to figure this out. If this power can help me save people, then I'll master it. The wind stirred outside, rattling the window pane as if the universe itself had heard his declaration. And far beyond the stars, in a dormant satellite orbiting deep space, an ancient system flickered to life. A red light blinked. A file labeled, Subject Number 001, Saiyan, Status, Unknown, appeared on a cracked screen. Something, or someone, had awakened. The halls of UA buzzed with life again. Despite the recent villain attack at the USJ, classes had resumed under heavy security, with teachers and pro-heroes patrolling the campus like watchful hawks. To the students of Class 1A, this was supposed to be a return to normalcy. But, normal, was a word that had long since abandoned Izuku Midoriya. He walked through the halls quietly, hands in his pockets, trying not to focus on the flickers of golden light that sometimes danced across the edge of his vision when he blinked. He hadn't slept much, not because of fear, but because every time he closed his eyes, the memories returned. A battlefield beneath a blood-red sky. A warrior screaming a name he didn't recognize. Energy so massive it tore apart mountains. He had no idea who these memories belonged to. They didn't feel like him, but somehow, they were his. Still, He plastered on his usual sheepish smile as he entered the classroom. "Morning, everyone," he muttered. "Oh, morning, Midoriya," Iida said, adjusting his glasses. "Excellent punctuality as always." "Hey, Deku," Uraraka waved. "You doing okay?" He gave a small nod. "Yeah, just tired, that's all." But his eyes didn't match his words. They were sharper than usual. Focused, like they were searching for something just beyond the veil of reality. Before the conversation could go further, the classroom door slammed open with a loud bang. Everyone turned. Standing there, bandaged from head to toe, eyes half-lidded and bored as usual, was Shota Aizawa. The silence was immediate. "Sensei," Yaoyorozu gasped. "You're awake." Shiro blinked. How did you even get in here? Weren't you, supposed to be hospitalized for another week?" Kaminari asked, halfway between impressed and concerned. Aizawa stepped forward like he didn't hear them. Or didn't care. "I walked," he said dryly. "It's not hard. I teach a bunch of kids who keep blowing up classrooms. My pain tolerance is higher than average." Everyone exchanged glances. Then he leaned against the podium, arms crossed over his bandaged chest. "The fight isn't over." That got everyone's attention. "Wait, what?" Mineta yelped. "Villains again." Bakugo scowled. "TCH. Let them try it." But Aizawa lifted a brow. "No, I mean the UA. Sports festival is still happening." A beat. "Oh." The entire class exhaled in collective relief, followed by a cascade of mixed reactions. "Wait, seriously?" Yaoyorozu asked, frowning. "Isn't that a bit dangerous after what just happened? Shouldn't we, I don't know, postpone it?" Ojiro offered cautiously. Aizawa's answer was simple. "That would be the obvious choice, yes. But this is UA." Everyone groaned a little. "This event is more important than ever," he continued. "For your futures, for the public's morale, and because our enemies are watching." He didn't need to say it. They all understood. This wasn't just about sports anymore. It was a statement. While the rest of the class buzzed with speculation and groaning about training regimens, camera crews, and costume tweaks, Izuku sat quietly at his desk, staring out the window. He wasn't mumbling, not scribbling in his notebook, not panicking about how to control one for all in front of thousands. He was just still, focused. That caught Todoroki's attention. Then Uraraka's. Even Bakugo glanced over, sensing something different. Midoriya's jaw was clenched. His hands were folded. His eyes, not wide and excitable, but sharp and inward-looking, stared at something far beyond the schoolyard. A memory had returned again. One of a cloaked figure standing before a blazing sun, arms folded, voice echoing in an alien tongue. "You must train. You must rise, or you will fall like the rest of us." Whatever Midoriya had seen, it wasn't over. He was no longer just a quirkless boy with borrowed power. He was something else, something ancient. The sun had barely risen over Dagoba Beach when Izuku Midoriya stood once again on the sands he had once bled and sweat on, back when he couldn't even control one for all without breaking bones. Back then, this place had been a graveyard of old trash and shattered confidence. Now, it was his training ground. He took in the sea breeze with a deep breath, eyes closed, hands loosely at his sides. The sound of the waves lapping at the shore echoed like a lullaby, familiar, grounding, alive. "I have to figure this out," he whispered to himself. "Before the sports festival, before whatever's coming." He bent his knees slightly, spread his stance shoulder width apart, and focused. He didn't know how he knew the word. It had come to him in a dream, or maybe a memory. Not one of his own, but one etched into his very cells. A power not born from DNA scans or genetic quirks. A power that answered him when one for all stayed silent. Golden sparks danced along his arms as he concentrated, gathering energy at his core, like a sun trying to ignite. His muscles tensed, sweat beaded on his forehead. Up, he pushed the energy down into the soles of his feet and tried to lift off. His feet dragged through the sand instead. He leaned forward, too far. Wham! Izuku faceplanted hard enough to scare a crab several feet away into a bush. Ow! He rolled over, spitting sand out of his mouth and letting out a wheezing laugh. Okay, not flight, not yet. He stared at the sky, letting the sun warm his face. The world felt quiet, peaceful. in a way that made the chaos in his head a little easier to bear. He sat up slowly, brushing off the sand, and tried again. This time, he didn't try to lift off. He just breathed. He let the energy flow from his chest into his hands, visualizing it like a river rather than a storm. A small flicker of golden light appeared again, just like before. Not one for all, not explosive, just there. Okay, now just hold. Boom. The energy fizzled out with a pop, throwing him backward a couple feet and singing the edge of his hoodie. Gah, nope, that was too much. He coughed and waved the smoke away, but as he sat there, hair frizzed, hoodie slightly smoking, sand clinging to every inch of him, he started laughing again. It wasn't the laugh of success. It was the laugh of recognition. Like he'd done this before. 1,000 times. Failed. Got up. Laughed. Tried again. Somewhere deep inside, it felt right. He could almost see it. Shadows of a younger version of himself, or someone like him, crouched in the dirt under alien skies, fists clenched, teeth gritted, sparks in the air. That flicker of reminiscence filled him with something he couldn't quite explain. Not hope, not pride, heritage. He stood again, wiping his face, eyes fierce and focused. All right, let's try this again, because even if he wasn't sure what he was anymore, he knew what he wanted to become. The sun was high, glaring down like a relentless judge over Dagoba Beach. Sweat clung to every inch of Izuku's body, dripping from his chin, soaking through his shirt, and turning the sand beneath his feet into sticky patches of determination. He was exhausted, and smiling. One for all. None of it matters if I don't even know how to fight. Not just punch harder, not just blast bigger, but fight, like a warrior, like the ones in the memories that haunted him more and more each night. He slid into a stance, low, balanced, fists raised, feet shifting in the sand. His breathing was steady, his body loose, ready to spring. He moved forward with a jab, light and quick, then followed with a sweeping low kick that missed nothing but air. Then he reset. Again. Jab, hook, step back, elbow strike, guard up, reset. Again. Izuku had spent his life studying heroes, watching how they used their quirks, how they responded in crisis, how they overcame. But the men and women in the visions, they didn't rely on quirks. They relied on themselves. Their fists were like meteors. Their movements like poetry etched in the language of battle. And now, that language was beginning to make sense. Come on, he whispered, ducking low and spinning into a side kick that churned sand into the wind. Control, precision, no wasted movement. His limbs ached, his shoulders burned, but there was a rhythm to it now, a flow. The techniques weren't just appearing in his head like some flashy dream sequence. They were rooted in him, like muscle memory waking up after a long sleep. Another flurry of strikes, open palm block, downward sweep, counterpunch, reset. Again. He stumbled once, twisting too far on a roundhouse and nearly toppling over, but caught himself with a grunt, brushing sand off his cheek and laughing under his breath. His legs felt like iron. His back ached. His fingers were red from the rough sand and raw exertion. And still, he smiled. A wide, tired, slightly goofy grin. Because this pain, this process, it was something he had earned. Not all might, not one for all. Izuku Midoriya. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he didn't stop. His body moved on its own now, blending what little formal training he'd studied from videos with what felt right from the memories. Open palm stances, aggressive forward momentum, explosive bursts of movement paired with defense tighter than any armor. There was no one here to watch him. No crowd, no cheering, just the wind, the sun, the ocean, and him. A boy born quirkless, a warrior born of something more. By the time he finally fell to his knees, chest heaving, hands trembling, the sun had started its slow descent toward the horizon. He dug his fingers into the sand, breathing deep, smiling through the exhaustion. I'm getting closer. And for a brief moment, as the wind whipped through his sweat-soaked hair, he swore he heard a voice echo inside him, not loud, not clear, but present. Not bad, kid. Izuku's eyes opened wide. He looked around. No one. Just the sea. He grinned again. Not surprised. Just seen. The wind howled louder today. The waves crashed harder. And Izuku Midoriya was still standing. Day 3. The soreness hadn't faded, it had settled into his muscles like an old friend. His hoodie hung around his waist, drenched from effort. Every inch of his body radiated fatigue, but his eyes, focused, sharp, determined. His bare feet dug into the sand with each movement, finding traction as he unleashed a barrage of punches into the salty air. Left hook, step, right cross, elbow, then a pivot into a kick, the arc cutting through the breeze with a crisp whip. His breath came steadily, each exhale a release of doubt. He wasn't just practicing anymore, he was building. Not moves, not a style, a foundation. Between each strike, his thoughts wandered, not out of distraction, but out of curiosity. Calculation. He, and One for All. They weren't the same, not even close. One for All surged like a storm. Electric, explosive. It begged to be unleashed in bursts, to tear through limits and rewrite rules. He was different. It pulsed like a drumbeat. Warm, alive. It listened. It waited. It was like trying to speak with something that already knew what you were going to say. But what if they could speak to each other? He paused mid-sequence, panting as he wiped his brow, then settled into a low stance. His hands came up, fists clenched. Let's try something. He focused inward. First, he summoned a spark of One for All, a faint green flicker that crackled through his fingers and forearms. It danced wildly, like lightning trying to choose a direction. Then, slowly, he breathed. Deep, grounded. He reached deeper, beneath One for All, or maybe beside it, and found the other source. The warmer one, golden, older. He didn't try to force them together. Just stood there, letting both exist. One for All sparking across his left side. He humming beneath the surface of his right. Sweat poured down his face as he clenched his teeth. The pressure in his chest was massive. Not painful, but heavy. Like holding two suns in his hands, each asking to shine in its own way. He stepped forward. Strike. His fist tore through the air. Not powered up, not glowing, just clean. Controlled. Again. Another step. A kick. A twist into an elbow. This time, sparks danced across his back. His heartbeat synced with his breathing, with his footwork, with the raw will fueling his body. He didn't fly. He didn't explode. But he moved like someone who could. And for the first time since those strange memories began surfacing, Izuku felt like the two worlds inside him weren't clashing anymore. They were training together. Still catching his breath, he dropped into a crouch, letting his knuckles brush the sand. The tide rolled in softly, cooling his skin. If I can make this work, he murmured. If I can sink them. He looked up, eyes wide, a wild smile forming through the sweat and exhaustion. I won't just be stronger. I'll be something new. The night was quiet, not the calm before the storm kind of quiet Izuku had grown used to, but the peaceful kind. The kind that only comes when dishes have been washed, the hum of the TV fades into white noise, and the world slows down just enough to breathe. Inko Midoriya moved gently about the living room, tidying up after dinner. Izuku sat on his bed, toweling off sweat from his fourth brutal day of training. His body was sore, aching in that oddly satisfying way where pain confirmed progress, but his mind, it wasn't with his muscles tonight. It was elsewhere. His eyes scanned the shelf by his desk. It was mostly old notebooks, childhood journals filled with analysis on pro heroes, and notes from classes at UA. But one thing stood out. An old, leather-bound notebook. Dusty, and labeled. He blinked. He didn't remember putting it there. Mom, he called softly. Inko peeked her head into the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. Yes, sweetie, what's this notebook? She stepped into the room slowly, eyes softening as she saw the worn leather in his hands. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Her fingers brushed the cover gently, as if touching a memory. That belonged to your father, she said quietly. Izuku's breath caught. Dad, he carried it with him when he traveled. He never let me read it. Said it was written in a language he was trying to teach me, but, she gave a faint, apologetic smile. I could never make sense of it. I thought it might be one of those made-up languages, like people use in fantasy stories. Izuku opened the cover. His eyes scanned the first page, and froze. The symbols, the words, he could read them, not fluently, not perfectly, but like his brain was remembering something his tongue hadn't yet spoken. Wait, he murmured, flipping through pages. His fingers trembled. Paragraphs detailing energy control, fighting postures, diagrams of body alignment. Notes about something called key resonance and latent ancestry synchronization. And then, on a worn, yellowed page, scribbled in bold strokes. If you are reading this, my son, then you've begun to awaken. You are not just human. You are a Saiyan. Something in Izuku's chest tightened. His throat dried. A word, just a word, but it echoed in his bones. Saiyan. Like a switch flipped, like static cleared, visions, unclear, fragmented, of a world beyond stars. Red skies, black armored warriors, a name that pulsed in the back of his skull like a war drum. He looked to Inko, eyes wide, almost afraid to ask. Did he ever tell you what his real name was? Inko's brows pinched as she thought. He said Hisashi was the name he gave to feel a hint of something more. But one time, only once, I heard him whisper a different name in his sleep. I thought it was gibberish, but... She trailed off. Izuku looked back at the notebook, at the signature scratched on the back page. Goza. That was it. Not Hisashi. Not just Dad. Goza. A Saiyan who ran. A Saiyan who survived. His hand hovered over the page as he read the next lines. I was not a warrior. I was mocked for it. When our planet neared destruction, I escaped. Alone. I thought that made me weak. A coward. But then I met your mother. And I realized strength isn't always in battle, it's in choosing to live. To build. But you, Izuku, you were born with more than I ever had. You have my blood. You have their power. And you have your mother's heart. If you feel this energy inside you, don't fear it. Learn it. Train it. And when the time comes, rise. Izuku couldn't speak. He closed the notebook gently, clutching it to his chest. Inko moved forward, kneeling beside him. She didn't ask questions. She just placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry I never knew what was inside it, she said softly. But if you want to read it, I don't mind. I think he wanted you to find it when you were ready. Izuku looked at her, eyes shimmering. I want to understand everything. Inko nodded. Then do it. I believe in you. He looked back down at the cover of the notebook. His father's voice still echoing in his head. Goza, the Saiyan who chose to live. And now, it was Izuku's turn to choose who he would become. The sky was soft and gray, the ocean calm as glass, like the world itself was holding its breath. Izuku Midoriya stood barefoot on the sand, the breeze tugging at his hair and hoodie. The same spot he'd returned to again and again. The same beach he had once cleaned with trembling arms and aching limbs. But today, it felt different. He clutched the old, leather-bound notebook to his chest, his father's words now etched into his mind. Kamehameha. Even reading it made his pulse quicken. The notebook didn't explain where the technique came from, only that it was a legendary wave of focused energy, one that required total concentration, perfect balance of ki, and a heart not clouded by rage, but sharpened by will. And that it was a technique Goza, his father, had never been able to master. Izuku set the notebook down gently on a nearby rock. He inhaled slowly, feeling the ocean's rhythm flow through his lungs. Then he stepped forward, feet apart, knees slightly bent, palms open. The stance was burned into him now, drawn in the notebook again and again. Described in strokes that pulsed with reverence. Step 1. Focus. Step 2. Gather. Step 3. Release. He raised his hands to his side, cupping them together. His breath hitched. This was no longer about being the symbol of peace. This was about truth. He whispered the word, Ka, me. The air stirred. A warmth bloomed in his palms. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in realization. Ha! Crackles of energy lit between his fingers. It wasn't green like One for All. It was blue, brilliant, alive. It spun into a swirling orb, pulsing with a calm, terrifying power. Me. The sphere grew, humming louder, vibrating with purpose. And Izuku, he didn't tremble. He smiled. Ha! His hands thrust forward and a shockwave exploded from his palms. A beam of searing blue ki, spiraling like a comet, tore across the beach. The ocean split in its path, water crashing to the sides as the waves slammed into the surf with a detonation that echoed across the horizon. The wind howled, Sand whipped around him in a cyclone. And when it all cleared, Izuku stood still, his hands outstretched, chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. It had worked. He had done it. Silence. Then, laughter. Not the maniacal kind, not the desperate kind, the pure kind. Izuku laughed, staggering back a step, falling onto the sand, gasping as he grinned up at the sky. I did it, he whispered. His hands still tingled, not from strain, from resonance. He hadn't just fired a blast. He had communed with something ancient, something that lived inside him. Something that had always been there, waiting for him to find it. Saiyan, not a costume, not a title, a birthright, and now, the world would see it. The sun rose with a sleepy yawn over the city skyline, casting golden light onto the water's surface as it lapped gently at Dagoba Beach. The air smelled of salt and warm sand, but the peace in the atmosphere didn't extend to Izuku Midoriya. Not today. He was already drenched in sweat, shirt clinging to his back, hair damp against his forehead, as he planted his feet into the sand once again, fists clenched, jaw tight with focus. His body ached in ways that even one for all's controlled usage couldn't soothe. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His bones knew something now. Something ancient and thunderous. And it demanded discipline. Yesterday, he had touched the sky. The Kamehameha had exploded from him like instinct, pure, bright, and unstoppable. But today it refused to come. Izuku's hands shook as he dropped into the stance again, legs spread, knees bent, palms cupped at his side. The position had become familiar, almost natural, after so many attempts. He could feel the ki respond. It was there, inside him, but it flickered like a shy ember instead of igniting into a flame. He gritted his teeth. Came. The energy sparked in his core, dancing through his arms. Ha! He leaned into it, focused, pulled. Me. The orb began to form, but wavered. Unstable, shaky. MHA. He thrust his hands forward, only for the ki to sputter out in a quiet pop, more a puff of smoke than a blast of power. The disappointment hit harder than the recoil. He exhaled sharply and dropped to his knees in the sand, breathing hard, glaring at the empty space before him. Nothing. No beam. No roar. No confirmation of what he'd done yesterday. Only silence, and the roar of the ocean that seemed to mock his failure. He stayed there for a moment, head bowed, sweat dripping onto the ground. What changed? He thought. Yesterday it just happened. It felt natural, alive. Why can't I do it now? The answer didn't come easily. Instead, he pushed himself back up to his feet, digging his toes into the sand for stability. Back to basics. If the wave wouldn't come, then he would strengthen the one thing he could control, himself. He slipped into a familiar sequence, a blend of moves he'd pieced together from martial arts textbooks, sparring memories, and now, flashes of something alien. Techniques he'd never learned, yet felt etched into his muscle memory. A high kick followed by a mid-air twist. A sharp elbow strike paired with a low sweep. A barrage of short punches that ended with an open palm thrust that nearly buckled the air before him. Izuku moved like he was chasing something just out of reach. Every strike landed against wind. Every dodge was against an invisible opponent. The rhythm built up, a storm of movement as he spun and ducked, fists slicing through air, his body pushed beyond limits. He wasn't fighting an enemy. He was fighting doubt. His breath was ragged. His feet dragged lines in the sand. His muscles screamed, but he kept going. Move after move, combo after combo, until finally, he stopped. Standing in the center of the beach, steam rising off his skin, shoulders trembling. And he smiled, not because he had succeeded, but because he hadn't given up. That's the difference, he muttered aloud, letting the words ground him. Yesterday I fired that blast without knowing what it took. Today, I'm learning what it costs. The Kamehameha wasn't just a move. It wasn't about power. It was about control, precision, mental clarity under pressure. His body could hold the energy, but his heart and mind needed to guide it. He looked down at his hands. They weren't glowing, but they were ready. Tomorrow, he whispered to the wind. Tomorrow, I'll try again. He picked up his father's notebook on his way out, brushing the sand from its edges. The old words inside didn't taunt him. They encouraged him, because now, he understood. A true Saiyan doesn't just master strength. They master the struggle. The seventh sunrise greeted Dagoba Beach with a golden stillness, the waves catching fire in its light. Izuku Midoriya stood barefoot in the sand once again, breathing deeply, palms slowly rising to his sides. His eyes were steady now, not burning with frustration, but sharpened with intention. The storm of failure from the day before had passed. He hadn't returned to chase a beam of power. Today, he came to understand it. The air tingled faintly, as if it remembered what had happened 2 days prior. The sky had witnessed the blast. The ocean had swallowed it. But Izuku knew, he wasn't here to just repeat that. He was here to refine it. He dropped into the stance. His body moved with ease now, guided not by memorization, but by feel. Me. The ki stirred. Warmth lit in his core, steady and bright, spreading through his arms. The sensation wasn't chaotic anymore. It was focused, like a sphere turning quietly between his palms. This time, the energy didn't swell wildly. It obeyed. It listened. He could feel it. The balance. Not too much, not too little. He adjusted his breath. Control the breath, control the flow. And then, but he didn't fire it forward. He held it, and for the first time, he molded it. The shape changed, the swirling orb condensing, narrowing like a blade of light. He brought it closer, not to attack, but to study. To understand. He exhaled slowly, letting the beam collapse inward like a shutter closing. The light faded, dissolving into nothing. No blast, no explosion, but he wasn't disappointed. He was stunned, because for the first time, I shaped it, he whispered. The Kamehameha, so powerful, so destructive, had become refined. A tool, not just a weapon. He grinned. A new thought echoed in his mind. If I can shape it, I can apply it, merge it, create with it, and suddenly, the possibilities bloomed. Could he enhance a punch with ki? Coat his limbs, use it mid-movement, mid-jump, mid-fight. His mind spun with ideas. Dozens, hundreds, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. Later that evening, the clinking of chopsticks and the sizzle of fresh grilled pork echoed in the Midoriya household. Inko smiled gently across the table as her son scarfed down a third helping of dinner like he hadn't eaten in weeks. Wow, Izuku, she chuckled, placing another bowl in front of him. Are you going through another growth spurt already? He paused, cheeks puffed with rice, then quickly chewed and swallowed. I dunno. Maybe. I'm really hungry lately. Inko tilted her head curiously, watching as he inhaled food like a vacuum. You have been coming home with more than a few scratches, are you sure you're not overdoing it? No, it's not that, he scratched the back of his head, avoiding eye contact. I've just been training a lot. Martial arts, energy focus, general fitness. She raised an eyebrow. Energy focus. Izuku froze for a second, then quickly shoved a dumpling in his mouth. Inko smiled, letting it go, for now. But inside, Izuku's thoughts were racing. He could feel something shifting. His metabolism, his strength, his very biology was starting to respond in ways that were different. Saiyan different. He didn't know how far this path would go. But if today had proven anything, it was this. Power wasn't just about breaking limits. It was about knowing them. And now that he could shape energy with precision, what came next might be entirely his own. The beach was quiet again. But within Izuku Midoriya, it was anything but. His breath came slowly, evenly, as he stood barefoot on the cool sand. His eyes were closed. His fists were loose. He wasn't bracing for impact. He was inviting clarity. For 7 days, he had trained harder than ever before, pushing his limits not just physically, but spiritually. He was no longer a foreign concept. It was a part of him now, like a second heartbeat pulsing just beneath the surface. And yet, even with that progress, he hadn't even begun to climb. Today's goal wasn't mastering a technique. It was synchronization. He and one for all. He had felt them both. 2 titanic rivers of power, coursing through him in entirely different ways. He, steady, warm, connected. An internal energy that flowed with intention. One for all. Roaring, aggressive, external. A voltage-charged engine that threatened to tear him apart if he slipped. He inhaled, then stepped forward, Let's see if they can dance. With a sharp exhale, he summoned ki first. The golden hum flared softly in his palms, tingling up his arms. It shimmered beneath the surface of his skin, ready, pliable, listening. Then, he called on one for all. 10%. He felt the quirk erupted across his limbs, crackling like a storm desperate to be unleashed. It clashed against the quiet grace of his ki like a thunderclap in a temple. His knees buckled slightly, muscles strained, a spike of pain jolted through his right shoulder. He immediately dropped both energies, panting, staggering back with a wince. Too much, too raw, not aligned. He sat in the sand, clutching his shoulder. What went wrong? He whispered aloud. They both live inside me. But they don't cooperate. He looked down at his hands. One had channeled ki, the other had sparked with one for all. Like they were fighting each other. And then the thought crept in, quiet, simple, obvious. I've been trying to force them into a fight. Not a conversation. Ki flowed. It didn't explode. One for all burst. It didn't stream. But what if? What if he stopped treating one for all like a grenade and started guiding it like ki? It's not about fueling them both, it's about connecting them. That was the realization. He moved through the body, naturally, respectfully. What if he led one for all with that same method? He rose again, slow but determined. His body ached, but his mind had caught fire. This time, he summoned ki first, letting it wrap around his limbs, weaving through muscles, calming the tension. Then, like threading a needle, he pulled 10% one for all into the flow. The result wasn't immediate power. It was resistance. A pressurizing tension wrapped around his frame, his breath caught in his throat, but he stayed standing. Electricity sparked, controlled, ki pulsed, anchored, and for a moment, the two forces existed together. Not in perfect harmony, but not at war. He felt it like a locked gear finally clicking into place. I can guide it. He stepped forward. 1, 2, 3 rapid strikes, fist, elbow, knee. Each one carried just a sliver of force, but it was enough to leave faint scorch marks in the air. More sparks, more heat, more control. His body began to feel heavy, but not broken. The strain was real, but it was a price, not a punishment. Then, instinctively, he let it all flow at once. One for all coursed through every limb. He wrapped around every muscle. His body sang. Arcs of golden lightning erupted around him, crackling outward, blowing a small crater in the sand as he slid into a grounded stance, every inch of him glowing, alive, connected. His breath came fast, his heart pounded, but he was grinning. This is it. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but now he knew. He could do it. He could combine both legacies, Saiyan instinct and heroic inheritance, into something new. Something truly his. That evening, Inko placed a bowl of katsudon in front of Izuku, barely sitting down before he dove in like a ravenous beast. She blinked, bewildered. Izuku, slow down. You'll inhale your chopsticks. I can't help it, he mumbled through a mouthful of rice and pork. I'm so hungry. I can see that, she chuckled. Is this another training thing? He looked up, cheeks puffed. Then, slowly, he smiled. Yeah, but it's a good kind of training. She beamed at him, ruffling his wild green hair. Well, whatever you're doing, don't push yourself too hard, all right? He nodded, but didn't stop eating. Inside, his body was burning with energy. But his heart was calm. The sky above Musudafu was painted in a soft canvas of dusk. Clouds drifted like wandering thoughts, the horizon glowing orange and gold, slipping into indigo. The wind was gentle, brushing through the trees, and from his balcony, Izuku could hear the quiet sounds of the city winding down. He sat cross-legged, a blanket draped loosely around his shoulders, his notebook open in his lap, but tonight, he hadn't written anything in it. Not yet. His pen rested between his fingers, untouched. His mind wasn't racing the way it used to. No excited muttering, no strategic breakdowns of quirks or techniques. Just silence. And somewhere in that silence was a question that had refused to leave him. What was my name supposed to be? He knew the one he'd been given, Izuku Midoriya. He loved that name. His mom gave it to him. It meant, a boy who can go forward. She always said it with pride, with love in every syllable. But there was another name, one buried in stardust and silence. A name that belonged to the other half of him. The Saiyan half. The part that roared instead of whispered. The part that didn't cower in fear but burned with the need to grow, to rise, to become. He turned the pages of his father's notebook slowly, as if it might answer him if he asked nicely enough. Each one was filled with scrawled symbols, Saiyan characters, notes written in an alien but somehow familiar tongue. He could understand them now. Not because someone taught him, but because it clicked. Like it had always been there, waiting to be remembered. His father's name was not Hisashi. It was Goza, a Saiyan who had fled a dying world. A man who once rejected his warrior lineage, only to find peace on Earth. Izuku paused on a particular entry, a worn page where the ink had faded slightly, but the emotion behind it still echoed. If you're reading this, then maybe the blood in your veins understands what I couldn't. Maybe you'll be stronger than I ever allowed myself to be. Maybe you'll carry what I couldn't. Izuku's throat tightened. He had barely any memories of his father. Just vague images, warm but hazy. A deep voice, a soft hand on his shoulder. Laughter. And then, nothing. But now, through this journal, through these words, he could feel the man behind the mystery. Not a hero, not a warrior, but a father. A man who ran from battle, and built a life out of love. Izuku looked up at the stars. Did you have a name for me? He whispered. Something Saiyan. There was no answer, just the hush of the wind, and the far-off glimmer of stars long dead. He laughed softly. Figures. Even in space, dads are cryptic. Still, he wondered, what would his Saiyan name have been? Saiyans often had names tied to vegetables, of all things, odd, humorous but consistent. Kakarot, Vegeta, Brawly, Paragus. Goza. A strong name, simple, clean. If Goza had a son. Izuku closed his eyes. Would I be named after something small and stubborn? He murmured. Like, turnip. A chuckle escaped him. No offense, Dad, but the name didn't come to him. Not yet. And maybe that was okay. Because names weren't just given. They could be earned. What mattered wasn't the title, or the Saiyan lineage. It was what he chose to become. What symbol he would embody. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't some warrior resurrected from legend. He was Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless boy who defied fate. A student who inherited a legacy. A Saiyan who had yet to name himself. I don't know what kind of symbol I'll be yet, he whispered into the wind. But I want to be the kind of hero that even Saiyans would be proud of. He finally picked up his pen. And slowly, deliberately, he wrote. Today, I wondered what my Saiyan name would have been. I don't have an answer yet, but one day, I will. And when I do, it won't be a name that hides in the stars or shadows of old worlds. It'll be a name that means something. Something I'll build, something I'll earn, and I'll carry it with pride. The page glowed faintly under the city light. Izuku smiled, closed the notebook, and leaned back against the railing. His heart was calm, his spirit, still burning. The Saiyan blood in his veins wasn't screaming for conquest. It was humming quietly, waiting for the boy to forge his own path. The sky was pale blue above Dagoba Beach, a vast stretch of sand and sea touched by the golden warmth of late morning sun. The waves were calm today, like the world was holding its breath. The wind carried the scent of salt and old memories, mingling with the faint crackle of energy, he and one for all, dancing in a careful rhythm. Izuku stood at the edge of the beach, feet planted firmly in the sand, his shirt clinging to his sweat-slicked skin. His breath came slow and even, focused. This was day 9, another attempt to refine the synchronization of two titanic forces within him. In one hand, the electric pulse of one for all buzzed along his muscles, lightning arcing across his arms and shoulders. In the other, a deep blue glow of ki, pulsing calmly like a heartbeat made of stars. He took a stance. Inhale, exhale. He thrust his right fist forward, one for all roaring across his body in a wave of power. At the same time, his left palm swept in a circular motion, guiding the ki along his limbs like water in motion. The two forces clashed, spiraled, opposing currents in a single stream. His bones ached, his muscles trembled, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The mixture wasn't clean. One for all was like a surge of raw, brutal momentum. He was refined, internal, measured. But somehow, They weren't rejecting each other. They were learning him. He adjusted the flow, visualized the course through his tendons and joints, and felt his balance shift, like two ancient rivers meeting in a single vessel. A golden flicker danced at his fingertips. And that's when it happened. A jolt, not physical, but spiritual, stabbed through his spine. Izuku gasped, stumbling back a step. His ki flared uncontrollably, and the arc of One for All surged in violent response. He gritted his teeth, trying to reel them in, but something was off. No, something was awakening. Images flooded his mind, not memories, instinct. A jungle of stars, a full moon hanging above cracked earth, a monstrous roar that echoed through galaxies, a towering silhouette covered in fur and rage, with eyes like molten gold and fangs bared to the heavens. The great ape, the Uzaru. His heart pounded in his chest like a war drum. The ki inside him twisted, wild and primal, and for a heartbeat, just one terrifying heartbeat, he felt the urge. To roar, to destroy, to conquer. His pupils thinned, his breathing spiked. He looked down, and saw it. For the briefest of moments, his own shadow had a tail. A long, muscular Saiyan tail, swaying behind him like it belonged there all along. Izuku's hands trembled. No, he whispered. What was that? Then, without thinking, he slammed his fist into the ground. The sand cratered beneath the force, a cloud of dust bursting around him like a smoke bomb. Tiny rocks and debris scattered, caught in the sudden gust of ki that exploded outward from his core. He crouched there, fist still buried in the sand, his back heaving with ragged breaths. The images still lingered, that monstrous form, that alien fury, that tail. It was like something ancient inside him had stirred for the first time in his life, and it scared him. He sat back slowly, staring at the print his fist had left in the sand. What was that power? His hand shook slightly. I saw something, he muttered. No, someone, but it was me, like a version of me I didn't know existed. The word echoed in his mind, whispered in a language he didn't remember learning. Uzaru. He'd read about it in his father's notebook, a bestial form tied to the full moon. A form Saiyans could transform into, if they still had their tails. But he didn't. Right, he reached behind him instinctively, touching the base of his spine. Nothing, just skin and sweat and muscle. But for a moment, it had been there. And the instinct still pulsed beneath the surface like an echo, distant, but hungry. Izuku stood up slowly, brushing the sand from his arms. He stared out at the ocean, its waves gentle and endless. That form, that part of him, wasn't something he could ignore anymore. It was a reminder that no matter how much he trained, no matter how much he honed his mind and body and spirit, there were parts of him still unknown, still untamed, still waiting to awaken, but he wouldn't run from it. Not anymore. I don't know what that was, he whispered. But I'll figure it out. I have to. He glanced at the sky, the sun now lowering toward the horizon. Whatever it is, it's part of me. And with that, he picked up his bag and began walking home. The image of the great ape burned into his thoughts, not as a curse, but as a challenge. A question waiting to be answered. And he intended to answer it. The morning was still young, painted in soft blues and golds as sunlight spilled across the familiar sands of Dagoba Beach. The sea whispered, waves curling gently over themselves, as if nature itself was waiting to see something spectacular. Izuku Midoriya stood on the edge of the shore, bare feet sunk into the sand, fists clenched at his sides. His hair rustled with the breeze, but his eyes, green and determined, were focused on the horizon. Today wasn't about punches. It wasn't about ki blasts, or even One for All. Today was about freedom. He'd read the entry in his father's notebook 3 times already. The translation was messy in places, scratched and smudged, but the meaning was clear. Flight is not born of muscle, but of will. He must lift you, not from the ground, but from yourself. It had sounded cryptic at first. But now, after so many days of training, after his body had begun to hum in sync with his energy, he felt it. Not perfectly, not fully, but enough to try. Again, he inhaled deeply, exhaled, let the ki pool in his core. Like liquid fire behind his ribs, it gathered, then rose. His aura flickered around him in threads of sapphire blue. Not sparking like One for All. No, This was smoother, like wind wrapped in light. He bent his knees slightly. Focused. Imagined himself rising. Not fighting gravity, but leaving it behind. Okay, he muttered. You've got this. You're Izuku Midoriya. You're a Saiyan. You're not stuck to the ground anymore. And then, he jumped. Not high, just a little hop. And, promptly faceplanted in the sand. GHH. Okay, he groaned, spitting sand. That was not majestic. Undeterred, he got up, brushed off his face, and closed his eyes again. It's not about jumping. It's not about trying to fly like All Might leaps. It's about control. It's about belief. The ki gathered again. This time, he imagined it rising from the soles of his feet, wrapping around his ankles, lifting him like a wind beneath a leaf. He opened one eye. His foot hovered an inch off the ground. He gasped, and immediately fell over again. Progress. He coughed, grinning. For hours, he kept trying. Again and again, his energy dipped, recharged, flickered, and yet he didn't stop. He laughed every time he fell. He cheered every time he floated for even a second. And then, it happened. He didn't notice it at first. He was breathing slowly, letting the energy swirl around him, balanced between One for All's simmering charge and his own inner light. And suddenly, he was off the ground. No jump, no push, just flight. His eyes opened wide. The wind hit his face gently, lifting his hair, and he realized he was floating. Then lifting, then rising. His feet were inches, then feet, then meters above the sand. The wind grew louder in his ears, ruffling his shirt like he was on a high-speed train. His body adjusted naturally, arms out, legs tilting just slightly behind him like he'd done it 100 times before. He wasn't just flying, he was soaring. Woo hhhhhh. He shouted into the sky, laughter bursting from his chest. I'm doing it. I'm flying. He twirled in the air, testing balance, and spun once, almost crashing into a drift of clouds. But instead of panic, he laughed harder, letting instinct guide him. He zipped above the waves, low enough to skim the ocean with his fingers, and then shot skyward again in an arc that made his stomach flip. He felt limitless. No more chasing heroes on the ground. No more looking up to others. Today, he flew. He didn't just feel like a Saiyan. He felt like himself. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't weighed down by worry, or overthinking, or expectations. He was in the air, above all of it. His heart was lighter than his body. After some time, how long, he didn't know, he floated back down slowly to the beach, his landing a bit wobbly but full of pride. His feet touched the ground. But his spirit, still way up there. He sat down in the sand, chest heaving with breathless joy, a wide smile on his face as the breeze wrapped around him like an old friend. This, he whispered, this must be what freedom feels like. And from the depths of his soul, something ancient stirred, not rage, not instinct, but purpose. He wasn't just training for a tournament. He was learning what it meant to be both a hero and a Saiyan. The skies still held the memory of yesterday's breakthrough. The wind welcomed him back like an old friend. The sun basked him in warmth as Izuku Midoriya hovered above the shoreline of Dagoba Beach, green eyes narrowed in fierce concentration, his aura flickering with a quiet, milky glow. The earlier flights were joyful chaos, wild arcs of excitement and instinct. But today was focus. Today was power. He floated in place, legs folded slightly, hands out to his sides, as soft pulses of energy rippled around him. It wasn't just ki anymore, it was his ki. The same warm current he once felt in flickers now surrounded him in smooth waves, an opalescent aura that shimmered like starlight across water. It didn't surge like One for All's lightning. It flowed, and with One for All added in, the harmony was becoming exhilarating. He kicked off the air gently and darted forward, arms tucked in, shooting like a blur over the beach, then turned on a dime midair, flipping backward and landing softly, as if gravity had been demoted to a mere suggestion. He inhaled. All right, let's step it up. He opened the worn notebook, his father's, still sand-dusted at the edges. The pages crinkled, but the ink remained bold. He flipped to a section he hadn't touched before. When one learns to master the body's internal energy, the next step is projection. He is not limited to the body. It is an extension of it. And with control, it can strike, shield, or sever. Izuku stared at a roughly sketched diagram of a spiraling energy ball being formed between the palms. He blinked. His hands tingled. He stood tall, breath steady. He recalled the Kamehameha, how it took shape with focus, willpower, and memory. This would be similar, but not mimicry. This would be his. Hands to his side, he let the ki pull again, slowly this time, imagining it spiraling gently around his arms like a wrapping ribbon. A sphere of energy flickered between his palms, pale and misty like a cloud caught in a jar. The wind bent around him. He could feel one for all swirling beneath it, a grounding force like roots anchoring a storm. The orb shrank, compacted, not by accident, but intent. "Let's try something," Izuku murmured. He threw his hand forward. The energy shot out, not as a destructive blast, but as a controlled stream of condensed ki, part heat, part pressure, all precision. It struck a distant pile of rusted scrap and exploded in a burst of harmless white light, like a signal flare. His heart skipped, not because of the power, but because of the control. He felt the air tremble around him. Not in fear, but in awe. He rose again, letting his feet lift without effort now. Sparks of emerald lightning coiled in arcs from his shoulders as he pulled one for all into alignment, letting it brace his limbs, enhance his reflexes, bolster his body. The milky aura of his ki shimmered brighter around him, and then merged with one for all's storm. Blue lightning raced through white fog. Power crackled through peace. He dove forward midair, twisting, flipping, then pulling into a hover. He launched another shot, smaller, this time, with a snap of his wrist, like he was flicking a pebble of light. It struck a nearby pole and singed it. Not too much, just enough. "Okay," he whispered, eyes wide. That was clean. He laughed again. Not giddy like before, but full of confidence. He'd been strong before. He'd trained until his bones screamed. But this was him evolving. And more importantly, this was just the beginning. He landed again, sweaty but energized, staring down at his hands. He and one for all. Past and present, legacy and future. He could feel how they could blend, not like oil and water, but like two halves of a blade. One slicing forward, the other driving the weight. And if he could keep refining this, he might just become something no one ever expected. Not a symbol of peace. Not a carbon copy of All Might. But something new. He looked up at the sky, still high, still limitless. "I'll master this," he whispered. "I'll surpass everything." The scent of the ocean clung to Izuku's skin, salt and sweat mingling as he sat beneath the shade of a half-sunken lifeguard tower. The beach was quiet again, just the rhythmic lap of waves and the gentle rush of wind through torn umbrellas and forgotten debris. The training was intense today, but this was different. In his lap, the leather-bound notebook, aged and worn from years of travel, was open to a page he hadn't dared examine before. A thick, flattened object was gently pressed between its pages, dried and brownish green, like a withered coffee bean, but unmistakably alive. A single senzu bean. Izuku stared at it like it was made of starlight. He lifted it carefully, like it might vanish if he breathed wrong. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but awe. His father's handwriting on the opposite page was dense and flowing. Even before reading, Izuku could feel a certain reverence in the script, as though Goza, had written this not as instruction, but testament. Senzu beans. A rare, sacred crop from a distant world. When consumed, they can revitalize a person's energy, mend wounds, and restore vitality, all within seconds. They do not replace training. They do not cure the soul. But they preserve life. They are the legacy of survival. Treat them with honor. Izuku's eyes scanned further. They grow best in high-energy environments, soil infused with ki, tended with intent. One bean can grow a full plant, but only if given a proper mix of warmth, water, and energy cycles. This one, I've kept safe. For the future. For him. Izuku's breath caught. For him. Was that, for me? His eyes fell back to the bean in his palm. A strange warmth radiated from it. Not heat. Not pressure. Hope. He clutched it gently and stood. "I need soil," he murmured. "Rich soil. Somewhere ki can flow naturally." It took time, but eventually he found a patch inland from the beach. Quiet, sun-kissed, and surrounded by trees that swayed with their own quiet rhythm. It wasn't sacred ground, but it felt close. He dug with his hands, careful and slow, channeling just a bit of ki into the earth, as his father's instructions detailed. The air grew still around him, the energy almost meditative. As he lowered the bean into the hole and pressed the soil over it, he whispered, "Grow strong, just like I have to." A soft pulse radiated through his fingers, faint, but there. A flicker, a start. He stood and stepped back, hands brushing off dirt, face flushed from more than the sun. He didn't know how long it would take. A week, a month, longer, but if he could grow more, if the legend was true. He thought of All Might. The wheezing coughs behind the curtains. The scar. The time running out like sand slipping through fingers. If I can grow these, Izuku whispered, I could help him. Really help him. His eyes welled, but he didn't cry. Because crying was something you did when all you could do was feel. But this was action. This was hope made tangible. He sat beside the patch and pulled the notebook to his lap again. His father had written pages about the bean's care, the harvesting cycle, how to ensure its potency didn't fade. This wasn't just farming, it was an act of will. As the sun dipped lower, casting warm golden hues across the beach, Izuku closed the notebook and rested his hand over the soil. The ground thrummed softly, pulsing with life. He didn't know what the sports festival would bring. He didn't know how far this Saiyan legacy would carry him. But here, in this moment, he had planted more than a seed. He had planted possibility, and one day soon, he'd make sure it bloomed. The morning sun painted long shadows across the beach, and the scent of salt mixed with the warmth of earth. Sand crunched softly beneath Izuku's feet as he made his way to his usual training spot. His body ached from the past week of relentless sessions, but his heart burned with momentum. Today felt different. He could feel it in the breeze, in the lightness of his steps, and the way his ki flowed gently with every breath. After his warm-up, a brisk set of punches, aerial maneuvers, and a brief surge of ki infused one for all around his frame, Izuku sat down, letting the wind cool his sweat-drenched forehead. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out his father's notebook. The leather cover felt warmer today, as if it had absorbed all the time they'd spent together. He flipped through familiar pages, the Kamehameha's fundamentals, the basics of ki control, grounding stances, and even some philosophical musings on energy and identity. But then he found it. A folded, sealed page, marked with a warning. Only open when you feel your spirit is ready. This is not a technique for the faint-hearted, nor for those who believe power comes without sacrifice. Izuku hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, he opened it. The paper was older than the rest, and the handwriting more intense, as if written in a rush, or perhaps, through pain. Kaioken, a technique forged through mastery of one's ki and body in harmony. The user forcibly amplifies their energy output, strength, speed, stamina, by multiples. The base form is Kaioken, but with increasing training and willpower, it can be expanded, x2, x5, x10, and beyond. But heed this warning, my son, this is not a trick to be used lightly. The power you gain is tremendous. The toll it takes on the body is greater. Without full mastery of your ki, without mental and spiritual control, this technique can rip muscle from bone, shut organs down, or kill. Izuku's hand paused on the edge of the page. His pulse was steady, but his breath had stilled. Amplify everything. He could already feel the strain when he pushed 1 for all to 10% with ki flowing throughout his limbs. The muscles screamed, the nerves sparked. He could only imagine what it would feel like with something like this. And yet, his heart fluttered. A technique designed to take you beyond your limit, even for moments. It was like staring into the edge of a storm, beautiful, powerful, and deadly. He kept reading. The first time I used it, I collapsed. Blood poured from my nose and ears. My heartbeat stuttered, but the feeling, the surge, it was like touching the soul of a star. It taught me not that I was strong, but how fragile I truly was. Only attempt this when your spirit is quiet, your will unshakable, and your body conditioned to withstand collapse. Until then, learn, grow, and respect the edge. Izuku closed the notebook slowly, letting the words linger in his thoughts. The Kaioken, it was tempting. The kind of thing someone like Bakugo would have tried just to prove he could. But Izuku, he looked down at his hands, calloused, bruised, but steady. No, he whispered, not yet. He stood up, slid the notebook into his bag, and faced the sea once more. I'll get there, he promised himself. But right now, I've still got fundamentals to master. Control to refine, people to protect. He turned and resumed his training. Each punch more precise, each kick sharper, the flight drills smoother. He and One for All flowed together more harmoniously than ever, a quiet dance of soul and spark. The Kaioken would wait. It would be his trump card, his red edge, a technique not of desperation, but of absolute resolve. And when that day came, the world would feel it. But for now, Izuku Midoriya trained. And the wind whispered through the waves as if it, too, was holding its breath for what was coming. The stadium roared with life. Thousands of fans packed into the stands, their cheers echoing like thunder across the skies above UA. High banners waved, cameras flashed. The grand spectacle was about to begin, a stage not just for heroes in training, but for those ready to etch their names into legend. And in the waiting room just beneath that chaos, Class 1A stood still, on the edge of everything. They were dressed in their standard blue and white PE uniforms, no costumes, no gadgets, no support items. Just their quirks, just themselves. Tension hung in the air like static before a lightning strike. Mina bounced nervously on her heels. Kaminari tried cracking a joke to loosen the mood, but even he couldn't fake confidence this time. Iida was stiff with resolve. Ochako held her fists close to her chest, breathing evenly. Bakugo stood near the wall, silent, smirking, that dangerous smirk that said he didn't just come to win. He came to dominate. But it was Izuku Midoriya who stood apart. Not physically. He stood right beside Kirishima and Sero, who were doing light stretches. But emotionally, spiritually, he was in a different realm altogether. His eyes were closed, his breath slow, controlled, not because he was afraid, but because something deeper stirred beneath his skin, a calm, hot pressure that moved with the rhythm of his heart. And alongside it, the familiar crackle, the electric surge of One for All. The two flowed in harmony now, circling him like unseen currents. He didn't need to flare it, didn't need to prove anything. This wasn't the time to reveal his truth. No one knew what he was. No one knew what he was becoming. He was fine with that. A moment later, the door hissed open. The sharp click of boots echoed against tile. Shoto Todoroki stepped forward, his PE uniform pristine, the cold in his eyes sharper than ever. Midoriya, Todoroki said, voice calm, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Izuku opened his eyes. I don't care what quirks you or anyone else here have, Todoroki continued. But I know I'll have to surpass you if I want to prove my path is right. The room stiffened. Kaminari raised his brows. Whoa, talk about direct. Hey, Bakugo snorted from the wall. Better not trip on your own damn ice. Todoroki ignored the peanut gallery. His eyes remained on Izuku, calm, analytical, but focused like a blade before the draw. Izuku didn't bristle. He didn't puff up or posture. He simply nodded. All right, he said softly. I accept. But deep in his gut, something growled, low, ancient, thrilled. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anxiety. It was the pride, the hidden Saiyan blood, responding to the challenge with a pulse of heat. Not just from Todoroki's words, but from the truth underneath them. He sees me. He sees me as a wall he needs to climb. A smile tugged at Izuku's lips. Not smug, not arrogant, just steady, and real. Let's both go all out, Izuku said, lifting his gaze. No holding back. Todoroki gave a small nod, then turned and walked toward the corridor that led to the arena. The room stayed quiet for a beat longer. Damn, Kirishima said with a grin, breaking the silence. That felt like a boss fight cutscene. Ochako chuckled nervously. Did it get hotter in here? Bakugo simply rolled his eyes, but Izuku caught the faint flicker of attention from him. He felt eyes on him. The whole class suddenly more aware of the quiet, calm boy who had stood just out of the spotlight, and now stood at the center of attention. But he didn't need their awe. He didn't need validation. He turned his gaze to the corridor, and with one deep breath, let the flow of ki and One for All dance together beneath his skin, light and lightning. A perfect storm building under control. I'll show them what I've learned. But I'll save what I truly am, until the time is right. As Class 1A filed out, Izuku walked into the sunlight of the arena. The crowd erupted. The festival had begun, and somewhere in the universe, the blood of a Saiyan burned in quiet anticipation. The cheers from the crowd were deafening. The kind that made your bones buzz and your heart race. Students from all departments, pro-hero observers, and countless fans packed the stadium to witness the rising generation of heroes in action. But right now, all eyes were focused on a single floating platform in the middle of the arena. Standing atop it, arms crossed, expression cocky, was none other than Katsuki Bakugo. Midoriya stood with the rest of Class 1A at the base of the stage, watching his childhood friend turned rival rise to the moment like a lit match in a powder keg. "All right, you bunch of extras," Bakugo growled into the microphone, voice booming across the stadium thanks to Present Mic's audio system. "Let me make one thing real clear." Murmurs stirred in the stands. The crowd leaned in. "I'm gonna win this whole damn thing." Gasps, whispers, gritted teeth. Bakugo sneered, eyes narrowing in raw confidence. "I don't care who's here, what department you're from, or what kind of flashy quirk you think makes you special. You're all just stepping stones on my way to number one. So get ready, because I'm not slowing down for anyone." The stadium went silent for half a second, and then exploded with noise. Some people booed, others cheered just for the bravado. Class 1B shouted indignantly. Several students looked personally insulted. Monoma practically foamed at the mouth. Hitoshi Shinso raised a brow, smirking slightly, intrigued. Among Class 1A, reactions varied. Ochako's sweat dropped. "He's, really going for it." Mina groaned. "Does he always go full murder glare when he's got a mic?" Hiroshima chuckled nervously. "I mean, props to the confidence, right?" Todoroki, cool and composed, simply blinked and looked away. But Izuku's eyes narrowed. He didn't scowl, didn't fume, but something sparked behind his gaze. Not anger, response. A low burn of challenge lit in his chest, deep in the place where both his human heart and Saiyan soul resided. "You're going to stand on everyone to reach the top, huh, Kachan? Then I'll just make sure I'm the one you can't step over." He cracked his knuckles quietly, then exhaled. "Time to focus. The obstacle course begins. And now," boomed Present Mike from his commentary booth. "Let's kick this off with a bang. First round. The obstacle course. Same course, same rules, but this time, let's see who brings the unexpected." The students filed into place at the massive stadium gate. Ahead, the course stretched out like a death trap from an arcade nightmare. Narrow pathways, twisting terrain, mechanical hazards, and sheer drops. The starting gate buzzed with energy. "Ready," said Midnight, her whip casually resting on one shoulder. Midoriya rolled his shoulders. One for all simmered inside him, coiled like lightning waiting to strike. He hummed just beneath, calm and warm. His instincts said to go all out. His discipline said not yet. Go. The gates slammed open with a metallic roar, and chaos exploded forward. Robots. Giant three-pointers from the entrance exam stormed into the path like titans from a bygone war. The crowd screamed as dozens of students activated their quirks in every direction. Todoroki wasted no time. A massive wall of ice surged across the field, freezing several bots in place and creating a slick runway only he could use. Bakugo launched himself skyward with an explosive blast, grinning like a lunatic as he used air propulsion to weave past flying debris. Tokiyami's dark shadow lunged forward like a wraith. Mei Hatsume from support studies zoomed by on hover boots. And Izuku, he didn't move first. He observed, analyzed, watched the chaos and patterns unfold like a puzzle. Then, he moved. One for all burst into his legs at 5%, a perfect pulse that sent him dashing forward. He weaved between frozen bots and stomping metal limbs with dancer-like footwork, leaping up onto a frozen chunk of robot torso. A massive metal hand swung down. Midoriya jumped, flipped mid-air, and landed on another bot's shoulder. With a light tap of ki at his soles, he balanced mid-sprint and jumped again, using momentum, agility, and the split-second reads from years of note-taking. Todoroki is clearing the path with ice. That gives me traction. He hit the ice, and slid, not in a straight line, not recklessly, controlled. He bent his knees, shifting balance, and used his arms to steer like a human snowboarder. A soft aura of ki wrapped his frame to reduce friction. His body became an arrow of focused intent. Students watched in shock as Midoriya surfed the frozen field, not blazing like Bakugo or towering like Todoroki, but precise, smooth, and relentless. The next zone came up fast, the pitfall field of swinging pendulums and crumbling terrain. Izuku didn't hesitate. He jumped. Mid-air, he tightened his focus. Instead of activating full flight, which would give too much away, he pushed with controlled ki at the last second, extending his airtime just long enough to clear a collapsing panel and land on solid ground. Don't fly. Not yet. Keep it grounded. Keep it smart. One student tried to follow. Failed. Fell. Midoriya kept running. He made it to the tightrope canyon. Students were crawling, falling, shouting in panic. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Use balance. Ki on the feet, not too much, just a little to grip. Like walking on energy-coated wire. He walked the rope like it was a balance beam. Fast, controlled, efficient. The crowd noticed now. They started whispering, "Who is that? He's not flashy, but he's moving fast." The finish line. As the final stretch appeared, a steep climb up unstable rubble and mechanical debris, Izuku saw Todoroki near the top, and Bakugo flying just behind. Midoriya felt that fire rise again. Don't let up now. You're not just Deku anymore. You're more. You know it. You've earned it. One for all. 8%. Ki. Coiled. He leapt forward. Once. Twice, using rebounding momentum and explosive bursts of ki from his hands to dash through the air, bounce off falling debris, and arc forward with an aerial maneuver that threaded the needle between power and precision. He landed beside Bakugo with a gust of dust. Bakugo snarled mid-flight. "What the hell, Deku? I'm not losing here," Izuku replied, not yelling, not grinning, just focused. The finish line was in sight. Izuku tucked low, and for just a split second, let the Saiyan pride rise, not visually, not physically, but spiritually. A feeling, a thrill of combat and victory shared by his ancestors. "I will overcome." He surged forward. One for all crackled. He pulsed, and Midoriya crossed the finish line third. Behind Todoroki. Behind Bakugo. But he had arrived with them, not chasing their shadows. Next time, he thought, panting slightly as he looked up at the sky, "I'll be first." The stadium's roar never truly quieted, but now it had taken on a different pitch. Excitement mixed with confusion as the students regrouped after the grueling obstacle course. Then came the bombshell. The second event of the sports festival, Midnight purred with a playful menace, will be a cavalry battle. An audible ripple of groans and gasps flowed through the crowd of students. And then, just to stir the pot further, and to spice things up, Midnight held up her whip. The student who placed first, Todoroki Shoto, will be given a headband worth 10 million points. Cue the uproar. Bakugo gritted his teeth. Monoma cackled with mad glee. And Midoriya, he froze. He had just barely secured third place. That gave him a strong position, but not the most dangerous one. That target now sat squarely on Todoroki's head, and Izuku knew, he couldn't let that stay there if he wanted to be the one who stood at the top. But strategy mattered more than pride. The time to act would come. For now, he had 10 minutes to build a team. The team assembles. Izuku ducked away from the chaos of scrambling students, already flipping to a new page in his strategy notebook. His mind raced faster than ever. Okay, think. I'm not the 10 million target, which gives me some breathing room. But I need mobility, defense, and someone with support tech to throw the other teams off. He looked around, eyes scanning the crowd. Then, click, the gears began to align. First pick, Uraraka Ochako. She was strong, agile, and her gravity-nullifying quirk gave them aerial mobility like no one else. Midoriya, she called, almost reading his mind. Want to team up? He beamed. I was just about to ask. Second pick, Hatsume Mei. Unpredictable, quirkless in the traditional sense, but her babies could turn the tide of a fight if used right. He found her adjusting her goggles and grinning ear to ear. Izuku Midoriya, right, perfect. I wanted a high-profile candidate to test my support items with anyway. This is mutual benefit, right? Absolutely. Think of it as, unpaid beta testing in front of thousands. Izuku's sweat dropped but nodded. You're in. Final pick. Tokiyami Fumikage. His quirk, Dark Shadow, was both offense and defense. And if they needed a stable platform or a way to fend off flyers, Tokiyami was perfect. Understood, the Dark Hero said, bowing slightly. Let us trample the chaos. And with that, their team was set. Team Midoriya. Midoriya Izuku, Rider, Leader. Uraraka Ochako, Weight Manipulator. Hatsume Mei, Support Tech Genius. Tokiyami Fumikage, Defense and Offensive Stand. The storm begins. The whistle blew, and the battlefield exploded. Dozens of teams surged like stampeding bulls, some rushing blindly toward Todoroki's 10 million point beacon like moths to flame. But not Izuku. Uraraka, get us airborne. On it, she said, touching each of them and lightening their load. Tokiyami's dark shadow extended below them as a wide platform, giving stability and shielding them from sudden lunges. Mei, deploy the smokescreen now. Already done. She clicked a button, and boom, smoke grenades popped around them, masking their movement. From the stands, the crowd could barely track what was happening. All they saw was Izuku's team take to the air, hover out of reach, and vanish into the fog like a ghost ship. Meanwhile, Izuku was laser-focused. Don't go for the big prize right away. Let the chaos burn itself out. Save strength. Save one for all. Be smart. But instinct, his Saiyan instinct, itched at him. It told him to leap into the fray, to take on Todoroki and Bakugo and Monoma all at once. He clenched his fists, steadying himself. Not yet. Observe. Then strike. The skirmishes and the climb. Team Bakugo was a wrecking ball, tearing through teams with explosions and fury. Team Monoma was clever, stealing points from unsuspecting groups. But Todoroki was an ice wall. Literally, he froze everything in his path. Laid down glacier-like fields to block off swarms of students. His calm, methodical style contrasted wildly with Bakugo's ferocity and Monoma's sneak attacks. And yet, Izuku was undeterred. When the last 2 minutes were announced, his eyes locked onto Todoroki's headband. Now, he gave the signal. Uraraka dropped their gravity to give them a fast descent. Tokiyami coiled dark shadow like a spring. Mei clicked a button and launched 2 grappling devices to hook onto the edges of Todoroki's ice field. They slingshot forward, cutting through the cold. Going for the top, Midoriya. Todoroki's eyes met his. No, Izuku shouted, just as they passed him. I'm taking it. One for all flared in his hand. He pulsed subtly in his legs to give him midair control. Tokiyami's dark shadow shielded them from a blast of ice as Midoriya lunged forward, spinning at the last moment. Todoroki reached for his band. Too slow. Snap. Izuku yanked the 10 million point headband free just as Mei launched a puff of blinding light behind them. They were gone. Just like that. The final seconds. The last 30 seconds were a war zone. Bakugo came for them in a rage. Monoma laughed as he tried to steal from Bakugo. Ice, explosions, screams. But Izuku held tight. He didn't use one for all past the edge of 5%. Didn't use ki for show. Just enough to evade, to twist, to deflect. Just enough to win. End of round 2. Results. As midnight called time, and the chaos faded, the dust settled to show. Team Midoriya. First place. Gasps echoed. A few students fell silent. Todoroki clenched his fists slightly. Bakugo seethed. And Izuku. He exhaled, sweat dripping down his face. Step 1. Done. He felt it again. That echo deep in his blood. Not a roar, not a shout. But a whisper. You were born to fight. To rise. To lead. The air in the stadium was heavy with tension and anticipation. The echoes of the last event still rippled in the minds of everyone, but now it was time for the true heart of the UA Sports Festival, the one-on-one battles. The sky above was cloudless, as if daring the students below to shine with everything they had. The massive screen at the front of the arena buzzed to life, casting a glow over the competitors still catching their breath from the cavalry battle. Midnight stepped up, heels clicking with dramatic flair. Ladies and gentlemen, students and heroes to be. The moment you've been waiting for. It's time for the final event, the one-on-one tournament. A roar of applause shook the stadium. But amongst the cheers, a soft voice cut through the noise. Excuse me, said a voice from Class 1A. It was Masharao Ojiro. He stood upright, his usually calm expression now set with quiet resolve. His tail gently coiled behind him, a physical echo of his inner tension. I don't want to participate. Gasps rose from nearby students. Midnight blinked in surprise. Ojiro continued, bowing his head respectfully. During the cavalry battle, I don't remember much. I was manipulated. I didn't earn my spot here. My pride won't let me take part if I didn't fight with my own will. I'm sorry. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a warm, firm hand landed on his shoulder. Izuku Midoriya. His expression wasn't one of pity, but of understanding. He nodded slowly. I understand, Ojiro. Truly. That takes real strength to say. Ojiro gave a grateful smile before stepping back. Then, another voice spoke up. Same here. I was manipulated too, came the voice of Shota from Class 1B. He scratched the back of his head, sheepish but resolute. Doesn't feel right to move forward. Midnight's eyes shimmered with sparkling tears of excitement. Oh, such honorable youth. Fine then, both of you are officially withdrawing. With that settled, the bracket adjusted on the massive screen, shifting names to account for the withdrawals. Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he scanned the matchups. His name appeared at the very top. Match 1. Izuku Midoriya vs. Hitoshi Shinso. From the side of the crowd, a lone figure stepped forward. Looks like I'm your opponent, said Shinso, hands in pockets, lavender hair swaying slightly in the breeze. His eyes were calm, but something deeper simmered under the surface. Ambition. Hunger. I've been watching you, Midoriya. You're strong. Too strong for someone like me to beat physically. But that's fine. I don't plan on winning with strength. Izuku opened his mouth, instinctively about to reply. FWAP. A furry tail slapped across his lips, silencing him. Ojiro again, a rare grin on his face. Don't say anything. Trust me. Midoriya blinked, confused. Shinso smirked and gave a low chuckle before walking off into the preparation tunnel. Ojiro leaned closer. Shinso's quirk works with conversation. If you respond to him, he can control your body. I know because that's what happened to me. He's clever. You'll need to be more than just strong. Midoriya nodded slowly, the gravity of the next match beginning to set in. This wasn't going to be just about fists and power. It was going to be about control, strategy, and above all else, willpower. The stadium buzzed with renewed excitement. The first match was going to be a battle of wits and wills. And Midoriya knew, with the shadow of One for All and his Saiyan blood both boiling within him, he couldn't afford to lose. Not now. The sun hung high in the sky, bathing the stadium in a golden radiance, like a spotlight on the next act of a grand play. The preliminaries were over. The real show was about to begin. In the waiting lounge, the air was tense. Not with fear, but anticipation. Every student who'd made it this far stood beneath the screen displaying their names. One-on-one battles, the purest form of competition. No gear, no gadgets, no allies, just you and your opponent. A hero's crucible. Midnight appeared, her heels clacking across the platform as she grinned. All right, students, it's time to move on to the main event, the final round, a tournament-style, one-on-one elimination match. Let's see who has what it takes to rise above the rest. Cheers exploded from the crowd outside. But among the students, a voice cut through the clamor. Wait, said Ojiro, quietly but firmly. All heads turned to him. I'd like to withdraw. Midnight blinked. Oh, murmurs swept the crowd. Izuku's eyes widened slightly, shifting to his classmate. I don't feel right taking part, Ojiro said, his fists clenched at his sides. During the cavalry battle, I don't remember anything. I was under someone else's control the entire time. I didn't earn my spot here. And if I don't fight with my own power, my own pride, then I don't deserve to be in this round. There was silence, the kind that came with honesty too raw to ignore. Izuku stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Ojiro's shoulder. His voice was soft, respectful. I understand. Ojiro didn't look at him. But he nodded. Another student, Shota from Class 1B, lifted his hand. I'm stepping down too. Same reason. Midnight, never one to miss a good moment, wiped a theatrical tear from the corner of her eye. Oh, youth, so pure. She purred dramatically, before twirling back to the brackets. Very well, both students have officially withdrawn. The brackets will be adjusted accordingly. The battle brackets. The screens lit up, reshuffling names and faces. One by one, the students leaned in to see who they were up against. Until Midoriya's eyes locked on his. Izuku Midoriya versus Hitoshi Shinso. A silence fell over him. And then, footsteps. Shinso, hands in pockets, walked up beside him with a calm that was almost too calm. So, Shinso said coolly, "You're the famous Midoriya. The one with the power to break the ground just by moving." Izuku blinked. Before he could get a single word out, FWUMP, a furry tail wrapped around his mouth. "Ojiro, don't say anything," the tailed student whispered sharply into his ear. "Trust me, that's how he gets you." Shinso smiled, a crooked, calculating grin. "Well played," he murmured, turning and walking away with the air of a chessmaster who'd just lost a pawn, but found the queen. "I'll see you in the ring, Midoriya." Waiting in the wings, Izuku stood still for a long moment after Shinso left, his hands curled slightly into fists. So that's how he does it, his quirk. It's not just brainwashing, it's baiting, luring, mental warfare. But as he exhaled, he found his footing again. "No, this isn't just about quirks. This is a test of my resolve, my awareness, and more than anything, my control." The Saiyan blood in him stirred faintly, but Izuku tamed it with a breath. This wasn't the time to overwhelm his opponent. It was the time to outthink him. And so it begins. Back in the arena, Midnight raised her hand, ready to announce the first match. "Let the first battle begin." The crowd thundered in response. Izuku stepped out onto the battlefield, wind brushing through his hair. Across from him, Shinso. Smiling still, and watching, waiting. The stadium was buzzing. Cheers, whistles, anticipation crackling like static in the air. And at the heart of it all stood two boys. One, silent, breathing deeply, his freckled face calm yet focused. The other, smirking with calculated confidence. Izuku Midoriya versus Hitoshi Shinso. Midnight raised her whip. "Ready." The silence was deafening. "Begin." But Shinso didn't move. He just spoke. "You know," Shinso began, his voice dripping with venomous nonchalance, "your little friend Ojiro should have just shut up and stayed in his lane." Izuku's eyes narrowed. A faint breath left his lungs, the first signs of pressure rising. "He's just a damn monkey anyway." The moment the word left Shinso's mouth, something snapped. Snap. Like a thread pulled too tight. Izuku's pupils shrank, his teeth clenched. "Don't talk about Ojiro like that," he bellowed, rage laced in every syllable. But the moment his voice reached Shinso's ears, Shinso smiled. "Gotcha." Izuku froze. His body locked in place. His face paled in horror. He had spoken. Mental shackles. From the stands, Ojiro's eyes widened. "Midoriya," he spoke, Uraraka whispered, gripping the rail. Shinso's eyes gleamed. "Now, walk out of the ring." Izuku's foot moved forward, then another. Each step felt like a betrayal. His mind screamed, clawed, begged to resist, but his body didn't obey. Commentary booth. "I knew it," Aizawa said, eyes scanning Shinso's file on the screen. Present Mike blinked. "Man, what's his deal?" "The entrance exam was biased," Aizawa explained. "It favors destructive power. Those with quirks that aren't physical. They barely stand a chance." Shinso had only one route. The general course. He wants to be a hero. "But society's already chosen who looks the part," Aizawa muttered. Inside the mind, the voice of power. Izuku's soul drifted within an abyss of gray static. Cold, still, just give up, Shinso's voice echoed in his mind. But then, a spark, a warmth, and then, 9 silhouettes. Figures, cloaked in shadows. One by one, barely visible. Until the 9th turned, and spoke. "Tell me, is this how you're going to give up? After coming all this way? You, Izuku Midoriya, why do you think surrender is the answer? It doesn't matter if someone takes over your mind or body. Because there's one thing a Saiyan always keeps. His pride." The voice was familiar. Like a version of himself, older, stronger, more assured. "The pride of a Saiyan. The pride of who you are. So show them, Izuku. Show them who you are. Show them why you're better." Suddenly, boom, he flooded his being like a tidal wave of fire and wind. One for all ignited, his soul blazed, reality reclaims itself. Back in the arena, Izuku stopped. Shinso blinked. Wah! Izuku's body trembled, his aura sparked, a mixture of gold and soft green-blue, faint but growing. And then, he roared. A deep, guttural cry that shook the stands. RRRAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA world, students had to shield their eyes. The shockwave made even Midnight take a step back. And in the center of it, Izuku Midoriya, free, breathing heavily, his eyes blazing with emerald fury. And his voice, cold and sharp. You talk a lot, Shinso. But you crossed the wrong line. Call Ojiro a monkey again, and I'll show you what a real beast looks like. The shock wave of Izuku's roar had barely settled before the arena dissolved into uneasy hush. Dust drifted in shimmering curtains. The crowd leaned forward, breath caught between awe and confusion. Across from him, Hitoshi Shinso lowered the arm that had shielded his face. His violet eyes narrowed. Impossible, he muttered. No one's ever broken it once they answered me. Izuku did not reply. He only inhaled. Slow, deliberate, and reset his stance. Shoulders loose, chin tucked, eyes brilliant and silent. Shinso's jaw tightened. Cat got your tongue. Don't worry, Deku, he scoffed, spitting the nickname like a pebble. I'll loosen it for you. He prowled a step closer. You really think that growl makes you special? I was born with a quirk nobody wanted. Villainous, creepy, unfit for a hero. While you, his gaze flicked to the faint lingering sparks of one for all around Izuku's fingers, get showered with applause for breaking robots and flexing muscles. You'll never understand what it's like to have talent that scares people. Izuku's brow furrowed at that. A flash of memory burned. Years of quirkless ridicule, the words, "You can't be a hero," echoing in his ear. But he kept his lips locked. Don't answer. Don't give him the opening. Shinso clicked his tongue. Fine, let's see how long that resolve lasts. He sprinted. No wasted motion, no bravado, closing the gap in 4 strides, cocking a fist low. At the last moment he barked, "What's wrong?" too afraid to speak. Izuku's muscles twitched at the bait, but he stayed wordless, sliding inward on the line of attack. 5% one for all snapped through his calves, a feather-thin veil of ki steadied his core. He hooked Shinso's wrist, pivoted, and kept moving. No flashy strike, just smooth, relentless forward pressure. The crowd gasped. Midoriya wasn't throwing bombs, he was hurting. Shinso dug his heels into the floor, fighting for traction. Answer me, damn it. Another step. Izuku's palms pressed against Shinso's shoulders, driving, boots scraping across the white boundary paint. Stop it. Shinso swung his free hand in a wild punch, cracking Izuku across the cheek. The hit snapped Izuku's head to the side, drew a thin line of blood at his lip, but his feet never paused. He understood Shinso now, understood the bitterness, the clawing need to prove himself. I was there too, Izuku thought, but I found a path. You will too, just not today. Go back, Shinso roared, desperation tearing at his voice. He seized Izuku's collar, fingertips digging in. Izuku answered by dropping his center of gravity, catching the arm, and rolling. Seoi nage. A shoulder throw so crisp the audience felt the impact vibrate through concrete. Wham! Shinso's back slammed against the mat at the very edge of the ring, his heels skidded, 1, 2, over the line. Midnight's whip cracked through the air. Out of bounds. Victory. Midoriya Izuku. The stadium detonated in applause. The boy unfavored by fate. Izuku released Shinso's sleeve and took a step back, chest heaving. Shinso stared up at the sky, eyes wide, breath shallow, then covered his face with a trembling forearm. Why wasn't I strong enough? Cheers swirled. Yet some students, especially from general studies, shouted Shinso's name in support. Their voices reached him. He lowered his arm, swallowed, and slowly sat up. Izuku offered a hand. Shinso stared, then accepted. The grip was firm, honest. Tell me, Izuku asked quietly, why do you want to be a hero so badly? Shinso's lips twitched. A half smile, half grimace. Because I can't help what I want. Even if my quirk scares people, I need to prove it can save them. The crowd fell into thoughtful silence. A few pro heroes in the VIP box nodded approvingly. Izuku squeezed his hand. Then keep climbing. I was once told the same thing, that I couldn't be a hero. Don't let them decide that for you. Shinso exhaled, steadying himself. Don't lose too pitifully, Midoriya. If I'm falling here, you'd better reach the top. I intend to. Shinso turned, shoulders squared despite defeat, and walked off amid applause from the general course section. Somewhere in the stands, murmurs rose. That quirk would be perfect for hostage situations, he's got potential. For the first time, Shinso let the praise sink in. Recovery girl's office. Bandages kissed Izuku's cheek, antiseptic stung pleasantly. Recovery girl clicked her tongue. Minor contusion, nothing more. All Might, thin form cloaked in a suit a size too big for him, hovered nearby. Young Midoriya, you mentioned silhouettes. Izuku recounted the 9 shadowed figures, the commanding voice, the surge that shattered Shinso's brainwashing. All Might's eyes softened with nostalgia. Long ago, when I first tapped deeper into One for All, I saw something similar, faint outlines, echoes of the predecessors. He folded his arms. But make no mistake, it wasn't them who freed you. It was your own iron will. Izuku frowned, unsatisfied. Still, it felt like more than that. Perhaps, All Might said, laying a giant hand on his student's shoulder, but you're forging your own legend now. Dwell on today's victory, not its mystery. His grin flashed, bright but brief. Go watch the next match, my boy. Your journey's only climbing higher. Izuku slid off the cot, gave Recovery Girl a grateful bow, and headed for the tunnel, cheek throbbing, heart steady. Behind him, Chio leaned toward All Might. He said he saw you among them. All Might's smile turned wistful. A comforting thought, isn't it? Back in the stands, as Izuku emerged into the sunlight, the stadium erupted, some chanting, Midoriya. Others whispering about the eerie wind that had broken Shinso's quirk. Izuku took a seat, eyes fixed on the battlefield below. Next round, the distant rumble of combat echoed. Ice met explosions. Sparks met steel. Izuku rested his palm over his heart. Beneath flesh and bone, One for All pulsed. Deeper still, he murmured like a sleeping dragon. Next round I'll climb higher. And the whisper in his blood, ancient, proud, thrummed its agreement. Flames roared to life in all 4 corners of the stadium, licking at the sky with vibrant heat as the crowd buzzed, bracing for the next clash of ambition. The second match was about to begin. Thanks for waiting. Next up are these guys. Present Mike's voice boomed with dramatic flair, the stadium erupting in cheers as 2 very different competitors stepped into the ring. It's like he's the epitome of the middle of the pack. From the hero course, it's Tenya Iida. Middle of the pack. Iida shot back in protest, eyes twitching behind his glasses as he stomped forward like a robot on overdrive. Versus fully equipped with support items. From the support course, it's Mei Hatsume. From the tunnel emerged Hatsume, cheerfully weighed down by more gadgets than a tech convention display, arms outstretched like she was walking a fashion runway, if the fashion was mad scientist chic. She's up against Iida. Jiro blinked. I wonder what kind of fight it'll be. Suyu croaked, tilting her head. Quote. What is that? Sato pointed, squinting at the contraption strapped to Iida's back, one of Hatsume's gadgets. Huh, Iida is also fully equipped with support items. Present Mike yelled, almost dropping his mic. Midnight's voice cracked like a teacher catching 2 kids with candy in class. That's generally against the rules. Hero course students must petition to use support items. Tenya Iida bowed stiffly, hands straight at his sides like a malfunctioning android. My sincerest apologies. I forgot, he declared, his voice full of solemn regret. But, my heart was moved by my opponent's passion. Hatsume said she wanted a fair match, and she insisted I wear one of her inventions. Her sportsmanship was so fiery, I could not refuse. Oh, youth. Midnight swooned dramatically before composing herself. Ahem, I'll allow it. Is that really okay? Present Mike questioned. Aizawa sighed, scratching at his scarf. Technically, if both sides agree, it's not against the rules. Izuku, ever the observer, frowned. Hatsume, saying that, doesn't sound like her. He flipped open Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14, scribbling in quick, precise strokes. Wait a second. His eyes narrowed. She's smirking. As the match began, Iida dashed forward in textbook sprinting form. Hatsume, completely unfazed, clicked her mic. Isn't that acceleration amazing, Iida? Iida's being narrated, Kaminari said, confused. Turns out, Hatsume wasn't fighting. Iida had just walked into a tech showcase. One by one, she presented every feature. Her gadgets, her sensors, her hydraulic limbs, her electromagnetic shoes, her net guns, and more. She danced, dodged, spun, and soared. Her voice echoed over loudspeakers, not for the audience's entertainment but for sponsors. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle. I should have known. She never wanted to win. She just wanted to sell. 10 minutes of live QVC later, Hatsume gracefully stepped out of bounds. I've shown off everything. I'm satisfied. Midnight blinked. Hatsume is out. Iida advances. You tricked me. Iida screamed in despair. I'm sorry. I used you, Hatsume replied, totally unapologetic. As she strolled off, suit-wearing support company reps scribbled notes, some nodding in approval. Mission accomplished. Player waiting room 2. I let her manipulate me. I was just a puppet. Iida mumbled like a broken record as he walked into the waiting room. Ochako sat quietly, her brow furrowed in deep thought. Her usual bubbly aura was nowhere to be seen. You're not like yourself at all, Iida exclaimed. My brow. Oh, it must be the nerves reaching up there, she said, forcing a small chuckle. Iida nodded, sympathy in his eyes. Facing Bakugo is no small task. Ochako's hands clenched in her lap. Yeah, I'm really scared, but you know. Before she could finish, the door slammed open. Ochako-chan. A blur of green burst into the room. It was Izuku, panting slightly from the sprint. Deku-kun, what are you doing here? I know your match is next. And I know who you're facing. I know Kachan won't hold back, so I wanted to help. Just a little strategy here. He held out his journal, Hero Analysis number 14. It's rough, but there's a plan in here. A good one. Ochako stared at it. In his hands was a goldmine. Deku's thoughts, his tactics, his heart. With it, she could tip the odds in her favor. She smiled, and gently pushed it away. Thanks, Deku-kun, but it's fine. Izuku blinked. What? Why? I've seen how amazing you are. You're always thinking ahead, always helping others. During the cavalry battle, I think I relied on you too much. I need to prove I can stand on my own, too. Ochako-chan. She stood, her legs a little shaky, but her back straight. We're all aiming for the top. That makes us rivals. So, let's meet in the semifinals. With a determined thumbs up, she turned and walked out the door, nerves and pride mixing like fuel. Izuku stood still for a second, notebook still in hand, then slowly smiled. Yeah, I'll see you there. Flames rippled in the four corners of the arena, signaling the third match of the first round. On the Jumbotron, two faces appeared. Katsuki Bakugo, the explosive prodigy, every inch of him radiating lethal focus. Ochako Uraraka, Class 1A's ever-smiling gravity girl, now wearing a look of iron resolve. The stadium swelled with cheers and uneasy murmurs. Round face, meets the bomb. Bakugo's red eyes locked on Ochako as they met at the center circle. You're the one who makes things float, right, round face? He muttered. Ochako winced. Round face. After all this time he still hadn't bothered to learn her name. If you're going to quit, Bakugo continued flatly, do it now. You won't get off with just an, ouch. Her jaw tightened. Withdrawing isn't a choice. High in the stands, Izuku Midoriya's fists clenched. Do your best, Ochako-chan. Focus on the first touch. Midnight cracked her whip. Third match, begin. The first storm. Ochako sprang forward, right hand low, eyes on Bakugo's belt buckle. A fingertip was all she needed. Bakugo didn't dodge, he countered. Boom. A searing burst smashed her square in the torso and hurled her across the ring. She tumbled, coughing at the taste of smoke, but rose. That acceleration, Tsuyu croaked, unconsciously gripping the rail. A second blast followed, then a third, each one timed to Ochako's desperate rushes, each one blasting her into ragged skid marks along the tiles. The arena floor cracked under the punishment. From the commentary box, students and pros alike began to squirm. Even though you're fighting a girl, you have no mercy, do you, Bakugo? Suyu whispered. He can't afford mercy. Eraserhead's voice cut through the unease. He's respecting her by ending this as fast as possible. But Ochako kept getting up. Singed, bruised, trembling, yet still walking forward. Bakugo's lip curled. Not dead yet. The meteor gambit. Finally, after the 15th explosion, Ochako staggered upright, chest heaving, yet her eyes still shone. It's about time, she rasped, bringing her palms together. Thanks, Bakugo, for never letting your guard down. Bakugo blinked. All around them, the shattered tiles and concrete chunks he had blasted into the air throughout the match, scores of them, had been press-ganged into a silent armada overhead. Ochako's secret. Each time she fell, she'd touched rubble, making it weightless and quietly shepherding it skyward. A hush rippled over the crowd. Present Mike found his voice at last. She's turned the ring into a meteor shower. Bakugo's jaw twitched. Crafty nerd friends. I'm gonna win, Ochako shouted, and released her quirk. Debris rained like artillery shells. Bakugo thrust a palm up. Die. Blong. A single, monstrous explosion vaporized the falling rubble, the shockwave shredding the incoming barrage and flattening Ochako against the opposite edge of the arena. When the smoke cleared, Bakugo stood unscathed, hands steaming. But Ochako, though shaken, was still conscious. Her knuckles whitened. She tried to charge again. And her knees buckled. Quirk awakening. Everyone expected her to collapse. Instead, Ochako floated. Just a few centimeters. Just enough that her battered legs no longer had to bear her weight. It wasn't flashy, just gravity quietly betraying its duty beneath her shoes. Small pebbles joined her, orbiting lazily. Self-weight nullification, Yaoyorozu gasped. She's never done that before. It was a flicker, a raw, instinctive extension of zero gravity born of desperation. But it came at a cost. Ochako's face drained pale, sweat beating down her temples. Each second aloft siphoned stamina like sand from an hourglass. She bit her lip, forced her trembling arms to steady. One touch. That's all I need. Final exchange. Bakugo launched, palms crackling, intending to finish it with a point-blank blast. Ochako dipped beneath the first explosion, drifting sideways, fingertips inches from his gauntlet. Too slow. Bakugo pivoted, slammed an explosion across her ribs, and dragged her into a second blast that lit the center ring in violent orange. The concussive roar punched every spectator square in the chest. When the dust parted, Ochako lay in a shallow crater, unmoving. She tried to lift her hand. Once, twice, but the fledgling self-levitation flickered out. Her body hit the tiles with a dull, exhausted thud. Midnight hurried forward, knelt, checked a pulse. Uraraka is unable to continue. Bakugo advances to the quarterfinals. Respect in ashes. The crowd split, half in stunned silence, half erupting in newfound admiration for a girl who had driven Bakugo to raw power. Medics rushed in. Bakugo stared down at his opponent, chest heaving. For a fleeting instant, respect glimmered in his eyes. That meteor thing, pretty good, round, he caught himself. Uraraka. He turned away, fists still sparking, and stalked off the field. From the tunnel, Izuku's voice rang clear. You were amazing, Ochako-chan. As Ochako was lifted onto a stretcher, she managed a small, wobbly smile and raised her thumb toward the stands. It wasn't victory, but it was heroism all the same. The door clicked softly behind him, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, brimming with emotions unsaid and desires unfamiliar. Izuku stood still for a moment, hand lingering on the handle, his green eyes lowering in thought. His heart was still pounding from the weight of what Ochako had just said. The sincerity, the vulnerability, the admiration. He had always admired her strength. Not the kind that flattened buildings or launched enemies through walls, but the quiet kind. The kind that smiled through pressure. That held back tears to keep others from worrying. That carried the weight of a dream far heavier than gravity could ever impose. But now, something else tugged at him. Deep in his chest, behind the hopeful heart of a boy, there was a whisper, no, a growl, ancient, wordless, wild. A glimmer of his Saiyan blood stirred restlessly, demanding more than just camaraderie. It was instinct. It was fire. It was, claim her. He shook his head rapidly, trying to swat the thought away like a fly. No, she's my friend. She's Ochako-chan. I can't just. But even as he argued with himself, his body betrayed him. His cheeks were flushed, his palms sweaty, and his breath, heavier than it should have been. He remembered the hug, the way she clung to him like he was her anchor. How her warmth melted into his chest. Her scent, the slight tremble of her voice, and how it steadied once she was in his arms. And how good it felt to protect her. He had hugged friends before. But this was different. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes, trying to calm his breathing. What the heck is wrong with me? He whispered to himself, gripping his hoodie over his heart. And yet, the image of her crying face turning to laughter because of him, the way she blushed when he encouraged her, the moment she called him a great friend but hesitated like she wanted to say more. His heart beat louder. Thump thump, thump thump. Something inside him, something Saiyan, wasn't satisfied. It didn't just want to comfort her. It didn't just want to protect her. It wanted to stand beside her. To fight for her. To be hers. Or maybe, to have her be his. Izuku opened his eyes slowly, his expression now more conflicted than ever. Is this what it means to want someone? He thought. His whole life, he had trained to become a hero, to save, to protect, to inspire. But this feeling, this was different, and it scared him, excited him, made him feel more alive than any fight had before. But now wasn't the time. He clenched his fists and turned toward the hallway, steadying his thoughts. The next round was waiting. His friends were waiting, and she would be watching. He would win. He had to, not just for himself anymore, but for her. With that, Izuku Midoriya, hero in training, beacon of hope, and a Saiyan with a slowly awakening heart, walked away from the door, unaware that inside the room, Ochako was still leaning against it, fingers on her chest, cheeks warm, smile soft. And her heart, it was whispering the same thing. The hallway felt unusually quiet as Izuku Midoriya walked with measured steps, each one taking him closer to his next match, the quarterfinals. His conversation with Ochako still lingered in his mind, warming his heart and sharpening his focus. But now, that focus had to shift. All the first round battles had concluded. Kaminari had fallen to the overwhelming, vine-wrapped might of Abara Shiozaki. Yaoyorozu had been unable to counter the eerie, relentless assaults of Tokiyami's dark shadow. Shiro had been frozen in an instant by Shoto Todoroki. And now, it was Izuku's turn. The path ahead was clear, and standing at the end of it was Todoroki himself, a wall of ice and fire waiting to be challenged. As Izuku rounded the final corner of the hallway leading to the arena, he stopped. A towering figure stood in his path, arms crossed and presence commanding. The flames on his left side flickered softly, casting shadows against the wall. The number 2 hero, Endeavor. Izuku narrowed his eyes slightly, surprised. Endeavor, what are you doing back here? Endeavor's eyes blazed with scrutiny. I've been watching you. The way you move, the way you fight. Your power, it's not unlike his. It didn't take a genius to know who he meant. All Might, Izuku said flatly. Endeavor stepped forward. You share the same reckless drive. That raw potential, the power you use, it smells like his. It's no secret you admire him. Izuku frowned and shook his head. I don't think like that. I'm not trying to be the next All Might. Endeavor ignored the reply. My son, Shoto, is my masterpiece. The product of years of refinement and purpose. You'll be fighting him next. So I expect you to go all out. Don't disappoint me. He turned slightly, as if to leave, before muttering gruffly, apologies. I didn't mean to waste your time. But Izuku stood firm. The apology didn't sit right with him. Hold on, he said, his voice sharp. Endeavor stopped mid-step. Izuku's eyes narrowed, and something fierce flickered beneath his calm. The Saiyan side of him was showing now, protective, bold, and unafraid. I'm not All Might, he said firmly. And Shoto's not you. You better remember that. Endeavor slowly turned to face him, face tight with annoyance. I know about your little family situation. Izuku's fists clenched. And I'm not going to pretend I understand all the details. I'm an outsider. But even so, he took a step forward, staring Endeavor down with piercing green eyes. I'm disappointed. No. Disgusted. I don't know your side of the story, but from what I've seen. From what Shoto has been through. His voice dropped a pitch, sharp and filled with venom. I won't forgive the things you've done. Endeavor's eyes widened briefly, then narrowed in a scowl. His large hand clenched into a trembling fist, flames flickering angrily around his shoulders, but he said nothing. Izuku turned his back on the pro-hero and walked away, his cape-like uniform fluttering behind him. I'll fight Todoroki, he said over his shoulder, but not for you. This match has nothing to do with you. Stay out of it. Stadium Arena. Battle Zone. The roaring of the crowd shook the very ground beneath the arena. Present Mike's voice blared through the loudspeakers. All right, folks, this is the match you've all been waiting for. Two incredible students with explosive talent, Midoriya versus Todoroki. The bleachers were packed, heroes and civilians alike holding their breath in anticipation. Students from Class 1A leaned over the edge of their seats, faces tense with excitement and anxiety. Who do you think is gonna win? Kaminari asked. Kinda hard to say, Kirishima muttered. Todoroki's been scary good, but Midoriya's been training like crazy. Amidst stood Ochako, who sat quietly, her hands clutched against her chest, her heart pounding with hope. Please be careful, Deku-kun. Give it your all. The arena floor had scarcely stopped quaking from Midnight's begin, when Izuku Midoriya lunged, fist cocked, green sparks skittering around his forearm like fireflies. Shoto Todoroki answered with a stomp. A wall of jagged ice erupted between them, catching Izuku's punch head-on. Crystal fractured under the blow. Crack. But the barrier held, forcing Midoriya back a pace. Present Mike, howling, whoa. Midoriya opens with a right straight and Todoroki drops a glacial shield. Aizawa quiet. Razor sharp, standard opener for Todoroki, create distance, test power. Shoto wasted no time. He swept his left arm sideways. Ice spires shot across the platform in a fan, clawing for Izuku's legs. Midoriya vaulted, twisting midair with gymnastic grace, the frost blurring beneath his boots. Up in the stands, Class 1A leaned forward so hard they nearly tipped over the railing. Iida. Remarkable aerial control. Kirishima. Bro, he's dancing up there. Tsuyu. Hero, this is gonna get brutal. From Class 1B, Monoma folded his arms and smirked. Todoroki's not even using his other side yet. How long can Midoriya keep dodging? Izuku landed, shoes skidding. A second ice wave curled around his ankle like a frozen shackle. Balance key with power. Now, he thought, channeling a quiet pulse through his leg. The ice shattered in a burst of white dust. He pushed off, sprinting inside Todoroki's reach. Shoto's eyes widened. He slammed another ice pillar up like a tower. Midoriya's fist met it with a thunderclap. Boom, sending a concussion of air rattling through the stadium. Cracks spider webbed up the column, shards raining down. Present Mike. Midoriya answers with a shockwave. Did he just shiver, break air? Aizawa eyes narrow, he redirected the impact into the ice, not out. Smart. Less collateral. Izuku withdrew, flexing numbed fingers. So dense, my knuckles are ringing. He saw Todoroki's face. Neutral, almost coldly disappointed. Still not using that left side. Izuku called, breath fogging. You won't beat me holding back. The crowd hushed at the challenge. Shoto's gaze hardened. I'll decide how I fight, he said, launching another wave. Ice drowned the tiles. Midoriya dashed in arcs, electricity flickering down his calves. Each footfall used just enough force to fracture ice without losing momentum. Crack, 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 a staccato rhythm punctuating the roar of the crowd. He closed again. Shoto summoned a final pillar, only knee-high this time, hoping to trip him. Midoriya planted a hand on its edge, vaulted over Todoroki's shoulder, and aimed a left hook. Shoto twisted, raising an elbow-high ramp of ice that morphed into a shield. Punch hit ice. Both fighters skidded back from the impact swirl. Up in the stands, Kaminari. Midoriya's finding gaps, but Shoto's walls are crazy fast. Jiro, ears flaring, listen. Every time they connect, the shockwave spikes loud enough to rattle my lobes. They're cranking up. Then came the turning point. On the arena's far edge, frost crept along Izuku's sleeve, not enough to freeze solid, but a warning bite. He inhaled, tugging warmth from that hidden reserve. A faint aura-like sheen slid over his skin, melting the ice in wisps of steam. Only those closest might have noticed. Shoto's eyes narrowed. He sensed something. Not heat, not flame, yet a pressure that made the hair on his neck rise. Midoriya straightened. "You're strong," he admitted. "But strength locked in half its cage isn't strength. You told me outside the gate you'd climb over me, didn't you?" Wind gusted across the ruined platform, steam from broken ice mixing with electrical ozone. "Then climb," Izuku said, and his fist tightened. "Show me everything, Todoroki." Shoto's breath caught. Words from the hallway echoed. "I'm not All Might, and Shoto's not Endeavor." A tremor shook his left side, a flicker of orange heat at his fingertips before he clenched it away. He wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, he slammed both palms down. A dome of ice exploded outward, jagged ribs lancing for Midoriya from every direction. Izuku braced. Now, driving a punch into the ground. The impact blossomed into a radial shockwave that met the ice ring head-on, pulverizing the inner teeth and sending splinters sky-high. The collision boomed like distant thunder. "Present mic. What a counter." Midoriya just turned the floor into a speaker. "Aizawa. He's using controlled blasts to break Todoroki's tempo, but every full-power strike drains stamina. How long can he keep pace?" Shoto watched shards rain around them. For the first time, his cool mask cracked, just slightly. "He keeps pushing, keeps demanding." Shoto raised his right hand, conjuring another iceberg, but his left fist clenched until knuckles whitened. "How far will I go to win?" Far above, Ochako pressed a hand to her heart. "Come on, Deku-kun." Monoma's smirk faded. If Todoroki won't use fire, that green guy might actually break him. The fight continues. Ice spiraled, lightning arced. Two philosophies collided in crackling echoes, one fighting to honor choice, the other to defy a legacy carved in flame. And somewhere in Izuku's chest, a low Saiyan growl urged him onward, even as he hid its roar beneath disciplined breaths and emerald sparks. The air crackled with intensity. Ice spires shattered with each of Izuku's steps, his boots crunching the frozen floor beneath him like breaking glass. His arms were raised, electricity dancing along his limbs, golden white ki mingling with the green cackle of his power. His face, usually filled with wonder and kindness, now bore the hardened edge of battle-born fury. Todoroki stood at the center of the storm he had created. His breath came out in slow, cold clouds as he clenched his right arm, feeling it tremble, not from fear, but from strain. He raised his arm to send another barrage of ice toward Izuku. But he was too late. Boom! Izuku vanished in a blur of movement, blitzing across the battlefield faster than any eye could fully track. In an instant, he was at Todoroki's side, his fist slamming into the boy's gut with a gut-wrenching thud. "Take this seriously," Izuku growled, his voice coated in intensity that seemed to vibrate the air. Todoroki's eyes widened in shock as the blow forced him to slide back, boots skidding against the now fractured floor. But Izuku wasn't done. He charged again, a second strike winding up with a mixture of ki and sheer determination. FWOOOSH. Ice exploded from Todoroki's right side in desperation. A mountain of frost engulfed Izuku, freezing him solid mid-motion. The crowd gasped. Present Mike shouting, and Midoriya is locked in a glacier. That was a counter-freeze right there. Aizawa stern, too clean, too sudden. He won't stay trapped. Todoroki exhaled heavily, the steam from his lips swirling upward like smoke from a fire just beginning to burn. "I'm sorry, Midoriya," he muttered, his voice quiet. "But this is how I fight." Crack. The ice vibrated. Crack. Veins of green lightning began racing through the frozen dome. Boom. RAAAAAAAAAAHHH. Izuku's voice roared like thunder, erupting from the glacial prison with a blast of power that rippled through the entire stadium. The ice shattered into a million pieces, flying like glass in a storm as his body emerged, steam rising from his skin. His hair whipped wildly as a milky white aura pulsed around him, his latent Saiyan instincts stirring, sharpening, rising. OFA sparked brighter than ever before, mixing with the eerie glow of his inner ki. From the bleachers, Class 1A and 1B stared in disbelief. Yaoyorozu. He broke out with raw power. Tetsu. No way, that guy's not normal. Ochako clenched the railing, heart hammering. Deku-kun then came to unleashing the truth. You're strong, Izuku said, stepping forward. Stronger than almost anyone here. But you're holding back. Why? Shoto remained silent. A patch of frost covered the ground near his feet. Izuku's voice deepened, his aura flaring with each word. Don't lie to me, I can feel it. You're scared. Not of me, but of him. Your father. Shoto's eyes darkened. I don't want to use that side, I won't. Why? Because it came from him. Izuku stepped forward again, voice rising, echoing off the stadium walls. Because it reminds you of your pain. Your trauma. I get it. I do. But holding back, denying yourself, it's not strength, Todoroki. Shoto clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palms. Izuku's aura flared again. It's yours, damn it. The stadium fell dead silent as Midoriya's shout echoed through the air like a gunshot. It's not his. Not your mother's either. It's your power. So quit holding back and show me who you really are. Show me the real Shoto Todoroki. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, a faint whisper surfaced in Shoto's mind. His mother's smile, her hand brushing back his hair. You can be a hero too, Shoto, one that you want to be. His eyes widened. For a moment, time stopped. And then the fire came. A burst of heat exploded from Shoto's left side, enveloping the arena in a wave of blazing light. Orange flames erupted from his skin, the left side of the platform cracking under the pressure of raw heat. The ice began to melt. Present Mike. Woo-ah. Flames. Floms. Todoroki's finally. He's burnin' up. Aizawa. So, he chose. Shoto looked up, his face no longer cold, no longer distant. Thanks, Midoriya, he said. You reminded me. This power is mine. Izuku grinned wide, excitement flooding every nerve in his body. His Saiyan blood screamed. Yes, yes. Now the real fight begins. Izuku lowered into a stance, he and OFA's lightning spiraling around him like a storm about to burst. Shoto raised both arms, flames and ice roaring on each side like twin dragons. Come on, Izuku shouted. Here I come. Shoto roared back. The two launched at each other. Ice and flame collided with lightning and willpower. Shockwaves tore across the stadium. Air warped, earth cracked, light and color exploded in every direction. The crowd could only watch, spellbound, as two boys, each carrying their pain and their pride, fought not just to win, but to become the heroes they were meant to be. The stadium teetered on the edge of frenzy. Each breath from the crowd seemed to ride the crackling air between two titans, Izuku Midoriya, ringed in green lightning and flickers of pale ki, and Shoto Todoroki, half-wreathed in fire, half-armored in ice. Shoto's dual elements churned like colliding storms. Izuku's muscles shook. Hard exhaustion, hard untamed excitement. The platform beneath them was a ruin of molten craters and frozen ridges, steam hissing from every crack. Present Mike, hoarse, electrified. How are they still moving? Aizawa, grim, because neither one will accept anything less than victory. Grinding to the breaking point, Todoroki hurled a jagged glacier across the arena. Izuku sidestepped, but frost nipped his calves, slowing him a fraction too long. Flames followed, searing arcs that forced him back until his boots found the very rim of the ring. He panted, chest burning. His right arm stung from hairline fractures, his left knee threatened to buckle. Every shockwave he'd thrown had eaten away at his stamina. Shoto advanced, expression torn between resolve and worry. Give up, he urged over the roar of fire. You're hurt. Izuku's answer was a grin, tired, wild, proud. Not yet. He swirled at his soles. He lunged, fist cocked, only for another ice sheet to slam into his shin, locking him mid-stride. Hiroshima, wincing, that's bad, his legs trapped. Uraraka, hands clasped, come on, Deku-kun. Izuku inhaled, green sparks tracing veins beneath his skin. Balance power and life. Now. He drove a pulse through his trapped limb. Crack, the ice splintered, he exploded forward, only to meet Shoto's burning palm. Boom! A fiery blast hurled Izuku across the field, tumbling through steam and shattered ice like a comet. He slid to a knee, shoulders heaving. His uniform smoked, patches of fabric clung, charred and torn. Present mic. Midoriya sent flying. I don't know how much more he can take. Shoto's arm trembled, the temperature around him spiking. He drew a deep breath and raised both hands, conjuring a towering spiral, ice curving upward while flames roared through its core, a cyclone of blue, white and orange-red. Izuku struggled upright. Each breath felt like shards in his lungs. This is it, one more hit and I'm finished. The Saiyan blood inside him snarled in protest. Stand, fight, win. He steadied his stance, eyes blazing. Todoroki, he shouted over the elemental howl. If you're really fighting me, then fight with everything you have. Shoto hesitated, right hand frosted over, left palm blazing. The memory of his mother's gentle voice drifted through the roar. Be who you want to be, Shoto. His eyes softened, then blazed anew with conviction. He thrust both palms forward. I am. The cyclone surged. Fire and ice fused into a single cataclysmic beam racing straight at Midoriya. The instinct unleashed. For a heartbeat, Izuku felt the blast's searing edge and the bite of absolute zero. It's too much. But deep inside, the buried instinct of a warrior race awakened. A pale, milky aura erupted around him, tinged gold at the edges. His hair rippled as if caught in a rising gale. Lightning met ki in a blinding crescendo. He roared, pure and primal, driving both energies into his legs. In a blur he vanished, weaving through the beam's turbulence. Heat scorched his sleeves. Frost sliced his cheek, but he burst through, closing the gap in less than a breath. The crowd never saw the moment of impact, only a sonic shock that cracked every remaining ice pillar and blew flame back into swirling embers. Izuku's fist met Shoto's chest with all the force he had saved, all the ki he had held in reserve. A boom thundered through the stadium. Shoto's eyes widened, his boots left the ground. He skidded backward, 1 meter, 2, 3, until his heel kissed empty air beyond the boundary. Out of bounds. Silence ruled for half a second. Then Midnight's whip snapped downward. Shoto Todoroki is out. Midoriya advances. Aftermath of a tempest. The audience erupted, half in disbelief, half in euphoric cheers. Steam coiled where ice met fire. Brittle snowflakes drifted across scorched tiles. Izuku swayed, every limb screaming, yet a grin tugged at his lips, fierce and exhilarated. He thrust a hand toward Shoto, who still stood at the arena's edge, chest heaving, astonishment in his mismatched eyes. Shoto accepted the hand. Their grip was firm, mutual respect forged in the furnace of battle. Present mic, voice ragged with awe, what a turnaround. An unbelievable comeback. From the brink to victory. Aizawa, softly, so the ice melted, and not just on the stage. From the stands, Ochako's shout rose above the crowd. You did it, Deku-kun. Iida, Kirishima, and the others followed in a tidal roar of celebration. High in the VIP seats, Endeavor's flames sputtered as he watched, unreadable. All Might, hands clasped, hid a knowing smile. Midoriya and Todoroki shared one last nod. Warriors, rivals, friends. This fight had not decided who was stronger. It had decided whose power it truly was. And the games were far from over. The battlefield had long since quieted. What remained of the arena was a war-torn canvas, cracked, charred, and frozen in places where elemental fury had once reigned. But now, that chaos was exchanged for soft beeping machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic inside UA's infirmary. Two figures lay side by side on adjacent beds, both battered from their explosive battle just hours ago. Their uniforms had been reduced to torn fabrics and scorched threads, both arms and torsos wrapped tightly in bandages. A TV screen mounted on the wall quietly displayed the continuing tournament. Izuku Midoriya, eyes rimmed with exhaustion but still holding that spark, rested his head on the pillow, one arm behind it, while his other hand slowly turned the volume knob up on the remote. Beside him, Shoto Todoroki sat up straighter, his mismatched eyes watching the screen with quiet focus, though a faint bruise adorned his temple and his arms were tightly wrapped from the burns and frostbite of his own attack. You still held back. Izuku turned his head slightly, blinking at the calm statement from his silver and crimson-haired rival. Shoto didn't look away from the screen, but there was a half-smirk playing on his lips. I could tell. You didn't let it all out. Izuku chuckled, a dry rasp escaping his throat as he adjusted the ice pack on his shoulder. Hey, guilty as charged. But hey, can you blame me? I've got plans. Shoto raised a brow. I want to save my trump cards for the finale, Izuku added with a sly grin. Let's just say, I've got 1 or 2 moves the audience isn't ready for yet. Shoto exhaled through his nose in amusement. How very strategic of you. Izuku scratched the back of his neck, wincing slightly. Hey, I am a nerd. Both boys shared a quiet laugh, their laughter tired, but genuine. Though their battle had been fierce, it had left no bitterness between them. Only mutual respect. The TV broadcast. Match 2 Iida vs Obara Shiozaki. On screen, Tenya Iida was seen launching forward in a high-speed burst. But Obara, graceful and calm, extended her thorny vines to intercept him. They wrapped and curled around Iida's limbs like sentient ropes, halting his movements mid-dash. Present Mike narrating, and Iida's jet burst is intercepted. Shiozaki's graceful style is a wall of nature. Aizawa dryly, he charged in without a contingency. That's unlike him. Iida tried to counter, lifting himself off the ground with sheer force of leg strength, but the vines anchored him. They tightened like chains, forcing his shoulders down. Eventually, Midnight waved her whip. That's enough. Midnight. Winner. Obara Shiozaki. Shoto tilted his head. She's formidable, calm, almost unnerving. Izuku nodded, brow furrowing in analysis. Her quirks range and control are scary. It's not flashy, but it's hard to counter. Iida'll beat himself up about that one later. Match 3 Tokiyami vs Mina Ashido. The scene shifted to Mina ducking and weaving as dark shadow whipped through the arena like a wrathful spirit. Tokiyami stood calmly at its center, commanding his quirk with razor focus. Mina launched acid globs to scatter and blind, skating across them to avoid capture, but Dark Shadow was too fast, too precise. A single overstep led to Mina getting caught. Dark Shadow coiled around her waist mid-spin, locking her in place. Present Mike. And Dark Shadow closes in. The stage goes dark as Midnight declares Tokiyami the winner. Hiroshima, from the stands, Mina fought like a beast, though. Juro. She pushed him farther than I expected. Shoto frowned slightly. Tokiyami, he's the quiet type, but deadly focused. Izuku agreed. He's smart, too. Doesn't waste movements. Definitely someone I wouldn't want to go all out against if it was nighttime. The two chuckled again. Match 4 Bakugo vs Kirishima. The final match of the round began, and both boys visibly leaned in. Kirishima, battle-hardened and ready, clenched his fists with a wide grin. Let's see if I can keep up, Bakugo. Bakugo just snarled. TCH. Try not to bore me, Rockhead. The match began in an instant explosion. Kirishima rushed in with his hardening at full, tanking the first blast. His fists connected. A brutal, solid uppercut that made the crowd roar. Present Mike. Kirishima strikes first. This is gonna be a slugfest. Aizawa. He's aiming to outlast the blasts. Not a bad plan, if it was anyone but Bakugo. Bakugo responded with savage precision. He ducked, grabbed Kirishima by the arm mid-swing, then blasted him off his feet, launching the red-haired fighter skyward before following with an aerial explosion that sent shockwaves throughout the stadium. Kirishima slammed into the ground hard. He tried to rise, but couldn't. Midnight. Katsuki Bakugo wins. Izuku tensed slightly. That's going to be my next opponent for the finals. Shoto turned his head toward Izuku, reading the subtle seriousness in his face. You're not worried? He asked. Izuku gave a lopsided smile. Worried? Nah. Focused? Absolutely. Kachan's intense, but so am I. Shoto looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded. You know, we'll probably fight again someday, he said quietly. Izuku stared at the ceiling. Yeah, and next time, I won't hold back at all. Shoto's eyes narrowed in amusement. I'll be ready. Bonds forged in battle. For a while, silence reigned between the two warriors as the broadcast transitioned to commercials. The soft hum of hospital equipment and distant echoes of celebration from the stadium were all that remained. Eventually, Shoto broke the quiet. Thank you. Izuku blinked. For what? For yelling at me. For reminding me it's my power. Izuku gave him a thumb up. Anytime. That's what heroes do, right? The sun outside the window was beginning to set, casting golden rays through the blinds, painting both boys in light. Two warriors. Two paths. One understanding. The next match would be hell. But for now, this was a moment of peace. The air inside the athlete's prep room crackled with a quiet intensity. Izuku Midoriya stood silently in front of the mirror, gently pulling away the final bandages that clung to his side. His bruises had faded to faint yellows and greens, and the aching tension in his body had dulled thanks to Recovery Girl's careful healing. He flexed each arm, rotated his shoulder, and exhaled. Mostly healed, he murmured to himself. But not untouched. He had scars from Shoto's fire, faint marks across his arms, and one particular gash above his collarbone where Todoroki's ice had nearly sealed him inside a glacial prison. Yet beneath it all, his blood surged stronger than ever. His muscles were steady. His ki, carefully contained, shimmered beneath his skin like coiled lightning, ready to strike. This wasn't just another match. This was the semifinals, and standing in his way was someone unlike anyone he had faced so far, Obara Shiozaki. Stadium Arena. Let the match begin. The crowd erupted in cheers as the two opponents took their places. To one side stood Obara, her long vine-like hair gently swaying, her serene eyes closed in prayer. She radiated calmness, grace, and a sense of unwavering faith. Her presence alone seemed to cast a gentle aura over the battlefield, like nature itself was watching. To the other stood Izuku, in his pagey uniform once torn and weathered from his earlier bouts now freshly brand new. His expression was calm, but behind his emerald eyes burned something wild, a spark, carefully hidden. He bowed respectfully to Obara before dropping into a loose but ready stance. Present mic. All right, folks. Get ready for a fight between graceful control and unpredictable force. It's Shiozaki versus Midoriya. Aizawa monotone. This will come down to how well Midoriya can adapt. Shiozaki's defense is almost impenetrable. Jiro, watching from the stands, Obara's vines are like a fortress, can he even get in? Ochako, whispering, hands clutched, you can do this, Deku-kun. Midnight raised her hand. Begin. Obara opened her eyes and instantly sent a wave of her vines toward Izuku, each one spiraling with practiced precision. Izuku dashed to the side, his feet tapping against the stone with calculated grace. He weaved between the vines with precise, dancer-like movements, flipping backward when another one swept at his legs. She's fast, Izuku thought. But there's a rhythm, she's not trying to overwhelm me, she's testing my openings. He smiled. Let the dance begin. Using his agility, Izuku circled around her defense, only making short, light steps, conserving energy, watching for a break. Her vines pursued, wrapping around pillars, slamming into the arena floor. One clipped his shoulder but barely grazed him. Suddenly, 3 vines came from above. Izuku vaulted forward, letting his body roll under them before springing up with a small burst of ki-infused air, nothing flashy, but enough to give him airtime and spin. Present mic. And look at that aerial twist. Midoriya's fighting like a leaf in the wind out there. Aizawa. He's not trying to overpower her. He's picking his moment. Obara narrowed her eyes. You evade well, she said gently. But all men must face judgment. She slammed her hand on the ground. Dozens of vines erupted in all directions like divine punishment from the heavens. Here it comes, Izuku gritted his teeth, judgment rain. The vines chased after him like striking serpents. One grazed his ribs, another looped near his ankle. But just as they converged, balance one for all, with ki, now. Izuku pulsed his energy outward, not to attack, but to launch himself upward and away from the spreading root cage. He soared overhead, flipping midair, his fingers brushing through one of the green halos of vines. Then he descended, straight at Obara. She lifted her arms in defense, her vines snapping up to intercept. But this time, Izuku didn't punch. He used his momentum to feint low and slide across the ground, his feet kicking a burst of dust into her face. She flinched. Just enough. In that microsecond, Izuku was behind her. He tapped her shoulder gently with his index finger, which resulted to being pushed. You're wide open. She turned, her vines raised. Midnight's whip cracked. That's enough. As soon as Midnight said this, Obara looked down and saw that her foot was over the out-of-bounds line. Letting out a sigh, she sat down on the ground, eyes of defeat. The crowd exploded in cheers. Present mic. Midoriya slips through her wall of thorns like a phantom in the wind. The winner, Izuku Midoriyaaa. Class 1A collectively, let's go. Zero. How the heck did he pull that off? Kirishima. That wasn't just power, that was style. Bakugo grumbling, tch, show off. Shoto watching silently, he's getting stronger. After the match, Izuku walked over and helped Obara to her feet. She looked up at him with calm eyes, her breathing even. You fight with fire in your soul, Midoriya. But with a mind as still as water. That is a rare thing. Izuku chuckled, rubbing his neck. Thanks. That means a lot coming from you. You were incredible, too. She bowed gently, placing a vine-like hand to her chest. May your next battle bring clarity to your heart. He bowed in return. Backstage, as Izuku walked back into the hallway, his heart still racing, he leaned against the wall and let out a deep breath. Sweat rolled down his temple. That was close, he muttered. Any slower and I'd be hanging from the ceiling by vines right now. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. Not from fear, but anticipation. One more match. The final. And he could feel it in his blood, the Saiyan instinct stirring again. The energy in the stadium shifted once again. After Izuku's surgical performance against Obara, the audience was fired up, but this next match promised a whole new kind of intensity. Present mic. Alright, people. Strap in tight, because this next semifinal bout is gonna be wild. It's the Explosion King versus the Master of Shadows. Bakugo Katsuki versus Tokiyami Fumikage. On one end of the field, Bakugo cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders, wearing that usual scowl that promised a world of pain. His palms already crackled with tiny pops of heat and sparks. The way he stood, broad stance, confident sneer, it was clear he didn't think of this match as a challenge. Across from him stood Tokiyami, composed and silent. His eyes, visible, glowed with sharp focus. Beside him, his partner in destruction, Dark Shadow, hissed and twitched like a creature sensing its prey. Aizawa, flatly, Bakugo has the advantage in speed and aggression. But Tokiyami, he's not going down easily. Especially not with Dark Shadow. Meanwhile, in the bleachers, Class 1A watched intently. Juro. Bakugo's gonna need more than yelling and explosions to win this one. Kirishima. Still, Bakugo's never been the type to not go all out. Izuku sat silently in the middle row, his arms folded across his chest, a bead of sweat on his brow, not from fear, but quiet observation. His green eyes narrowed as Bakugo stomped forward toward the starting line. He's too confident, Izuku muttered. But Tokiyami, he's not going to just let himself be steamrolled. Ochako, sitting beside him, tilted her head. You think Tokiyami has a chance? Izuku exhaled. If he plays it smart, yeah. But Bakugo doesn't give people room to breathe. Begin. Midnight's whip cracked, and with that, Bakugo exploded forward like a missile, both palms igniting as he blasted himself toward Tokiyami with a murderous gleam in his eyes. Die, bird brain. Dark Shadow roared from Tokiyami's side and surged upward like a tidal wave of darkness. The two forces met head-on, explosion versus shadow. The impact echoed like thunder as smoke and swirling energy clashed violently in the center of the ring. Tokiyami held his ground, grunting as Bakugo's raw kinetic energy pushed against the dark tendrils. But he twisted his fingers expertly, guiding Dark Shadow to coil and ensnare Bakugo's arm. You overextend, Tokiyami said stoically. Dark Shadow slammed Bakugo into the arena floor like a sack of bricks. Boom. The crowd gasped. Present mic. Whoa. Dark Shadow goes for the suplex. Is this the turnaround we've been waiting for? Aizawa. Tokiyami's using his partner as a grappler. Smart. Mina. You that was clean. Zero. Bakugo's gonna be livid. Bakugo's voice echoed from beneath the rubble. You think that's enough? Boom. The rubble erupted in a flash of fire and light as Bakugo detonated himself free, flipping midair and landing on the outer edge of the platform. His hair was disheveled, his hands hissed, but his smirk remained. Tch. Not bad, he muttered, but that shadow of yours, I can still blow it apart. He dashed again, this time using irregular blasts to zigzag and avoid the reach of Dark Shadow. Tokiyami was forced to play defense. Dark Shadow, form a shield. The beast coiled around its master just in time to absorb another explosion, but Bakugo had already predicted it. He launched upward, spun, and let loose a concussive blast from above. Ka-boom! Tokiyami hit the ground, skidding backward. A part of his PE uniform torn. His shoulder bleeding. Dark shadow, he shouted. The entity burst forward, more vicious than ever, screeching and clawing through the smoke. It grabbed Bakugo's leg midair and began swinging him in wide, brutal arcs. Bakugo grunted and countered mid-swing by firing a blast at the ground, launching both himself and Dark Shadow upward in a crazy spiral. He grinned. Catch this, loser. With a feral scream, Bakugo reeled back his hand and let loose his howitzer impact, a spiraling explosion of heat and fury that consumed Dark Shadow in midair and shattered through its defenses with terrifying force. Tokiyami tried to brace, but the sheer force of it launched him back, and he hit the wall of the arena, smoke trailing from his body. Midnight stepped forward. Tokiyami Fumikage is unable to continue. The winner is Katsuki Bakugo. Cheers and unease. The audience roared, though part of the crowd seemed more stunned than thrilled. Present mic. Holy moly, that was a meteor strike from the sky. Bakugo does it again. Aizawa. Reckless, but effective. Class 1B's Awase. That was crazy, and terrifying. Kaminari. Man, remind me never to piss off Bakugo. Up in the bleachers, Izuku sighed again, folding his arms tighter. He's pushing himself harder than ever, Izuku said softly, but his anger, it's like a volcano. Controlled. Barely. Shoto, sitting a row behind him, nodded. He doesn't care about being liked. He just wants to win. At all costs. Ochako leaned in. And now, you're up against him in the final, Deku-kun. Izuku closed his eyes for a moment. Yeah, me and Kachan. He stood up, dusted off his jumpsuit, and began walking toward the tunnel. Elsewhere, as Bakugo stormed off the stage, refusing to celebrate, Tokiyami was helped up by Recovery Girl's assistants. Despite the pain, he looked up and muttered, I almost had him. He clenched his fist. And far away, Endeavor watched from the VIP seats, eyes narrowed. Good, he muttered. Now we see what the boy can really do. The boy Endeavor referred to was Izuku Midoriya, the boy who won his match against his son, the boy who showed Shoto a challenge. The stadium lights blazed like noon suns. Every seat shook with anticipation as two figures strode onto what little remained of the arena floor, scorched, cratered, and cracked from prior bouts. On one side, Izuku Midoriya, uniform new, lightning flickering across his arms, faint milky white ki shimmering beneath bruised skin. On the other, Katsuki Bakugo, palms already hissing with explosive sweat, crimson eyes promising annihilation. Present mic, voice breaking with hype, this is it. The final showdown. Midoriya, Bakugo. No out of bounds, only one will stand. Aizawa, low, tense, brace yourselves. Both are past their limits. This could get violent. Opening salvo. Bakugo launched first, ground erupting as he rocketed forward, palms detonating. Izuku responded in kind, legs crackling green as he met him head-on. Fist collided with fist, explosion met lightning. The impact boomed like artillery, shockwaves rippling through the air. They broke apart, then clashed again. Over and over. Punches, elbows, knees. Sparks and flames painted the battlefield strobe white and hell orange. Blood trickled from Izuku's brow. Bakugo's lip split, yet both grinned like mad warriors. Bakugo then spun, blasting the ground to whip himself around, planting a boot into Izuku's ribs. Crack. Izuku coughed crimson, but retaliated with an electric uppercut that snapped Bakugo's head back and carved a trench beneath their feet. Dark smoke billowed. The crowd could scarcely follow their movements, two blurs trading devastation. As soon as Bakugo got in close and personal, he didn't know that Izuku ducked at the last minute with smirk on his face as he a devastating kick to Bakugo's chest. Kaioken. With a shout, Izuku's body burned red as he dashed after Bakugo, sending blows upon blows of attacks with Bakugo retaliating. Ice-cold pain gnawed at Izuku's muscles. Kaioken's draining me, but pride won't let me stop. He slipped under a sweeping blast, drove his fist into Bakugo's gut. Take this seriously. Bakugo gagged, stumbling. An instant later Izuku's follow-up hook clipped his jaw, yet Bakugo somersaulted away, skidding, palms sparking. Damn you. Deku, like I'd ever lose to you. Bakugo shrieked, rage ripping through his throat. He crossed his wrists, sweat hissing louder, condensing, sparking, until a concentrated beam of explosive force erupted from his bare hands, roaring straight at Izuku. Izuku wiped blood from his mouth, laughing even as his legs wobbled as he sees the attack coming his way. No choice, crank it higher. His aura flashed even more wildly to crimson. Kaioken, ×3. Power tore through every vein, doubling, tripling his pulse. He thrust his cupped hands to his side, brilliant energy spiraling between them. Ka. Me. Ha. Me. Bakugo's beam shrieked closer, tearing the ground into molten ribbons. You're finished. Bakugo roared. Ha. Izuku's Kamehameha, fused with red Kaioken fire and crackling emerald sparks, thundered forth. Two titanic blasts collided mid-field, white core against orange inferno, locking in a deafening tug of war. Bakugo's raw sweat-fueled power edged forward, inch by inch. Izuku's feet dug trenches, his arms shook violently. Can't fall, I won't. I refuse to let him beat me. Teeth gritted, he screamed to the heavens. Kaioken, ×4. A blood-red flare exploded around him. Bones creaked, muscles tore, but his beam doubled in girth, shoving Bakugo's attack backward. Bakugo's eyes widened in horror, veins bulging as he poured every last drop of nitroglycerin sweat into the blast. No, 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 it wasn't enough. Izuku's wave consumed Bakugo's, storming across the arena and engulfing him in blinding light. The explosion that followed rattled the bleachers and sent a hot wind whipping through the stands. Aftermath. When the smoke finally lifted, Bakugo lay crumpled against the far barrier, unconscious, hands smoldering. The last flickers of his beam fizzled into sparks. Izuku stood at center ring, chest heaving, arms trembling, body striped with veins of agony from the Kaioken's toll. A hush fell. Then Midnight raised her hand. Winner, Izuku Midoriya. Silence shattered into thunderous cheers. Class 1A erupted. Class 1B gaped in awe. Izuku forced his battered left arm skyward, roaring a victorious cry that echoed like a primal battle shout. He wavered, nearly collapsed, but steadied himself, pride blazing brighter than any wound. Present mic, voice hoarse, unbelievable. A comeback for the ages. Midoriya claims the UA Sports Festival crown. Aizawa, softly, almost smiling, he went beyond. Again, high above, All Might clenched a fist over his heart, eyes shining. And somewhere in the stands, Shoto Todoroki nodded once, respect in his mismatched gaze. Izuku inhaled the roar of the crowd, pain radiating from every limb. But above all the cheers, one thought rang clear. Saiyan pride, hero's heart, I did it. He closed his eyes as he lets unconsciousness take him, letting triumph and fierce gratitude wash over him. The sky over UA Stadium was a breathtaking blend of gold and lavender, the sun dipping low as the dust of battle finally began to settle. The crowd was still buzzing from the cataclysmic showdown that had just taken place. All the matches, every struggle, every roar, every tear, it had all led to this moment. The medal ceremony. A platform was now erected in the center of the arena, pristine and untouched despite the chaos that had reigned only minutes earlier. With the field restored by Cementos and Power Loader's combined efforts, it stood tall like a pedestal of triumph and dreams realized. Atop that stage stood the three remaining warriors of UA's first-year sports festival. The podium. Third place. Fumikage Tokiyami. He stood tall. Dark cloak flowing in the breeze, beak slightly lowered in modesty. Though his match with Ibara had been brutal, his strategic mind and bond with Dark Shadow had earned him the edge. He bore fewer wounds than the others, but a quiet respect lingered in his gaze. Second place. Katsuki Bakugo. Wrapped in bandages, lips curled into a dissatisfied snarl, Bakugo had refused medical evacuation. He stood rigid on his podium block, teeth clenched, not out of hatred for Izuku, but at himself. At his own limits. His pride was singed, and his fury still boiled beneath his bruised skin. But deep down, buried under explosions and grit, there was something else too, acknowledgement. First place. Izuku Midoriya. Both arms were wrapped tightly in bandages, his face still scarred from the Kaioken and the beam clash. Yet he stood there, smiling warmly at the crowd, despite the ache in every muscle and the fire in his lungs. The weight of victory was heavy, but his heart was light. The crowd quieted. A figure stepped forward from the tunnel, his cape fluttering gently as he approached the stage with an aura of strength and inspiration. Now entering the stage, the symbol of peace himself, All Might. The stadium erupted again as the former No. 1 hero, still towering, still brilliant, climbed onto the stage carrying 3 gold-trimmed medals. All Might, for all his grandeur, looked at the 3 students before him not as a legend, but as a teacher. A mentor, a proud guide. The ceremony. He stood before Tokiyami first. You possess a rare gift, young Tokiyami. Darkness is your ally, but you wield it with calm and discipline. With time and control, you'll become a beacon in the night. He placed the bronze medal around Tokiyami's neck. Well done, young man. Tokiyami bowed respectfully. Thank you, All Might. I'll continue to walk the path of shadows, toward the light. Next, he turned to Bakugo. For a second, the crowd held its breath, expecting some resistance, some tantrum. Bakugo merely grunted, arms crossed, but he didn't resist. You hate losing. That's not a weakness, so long as you learn from every battle. You gave your all. You are strong, Bakugo, and I believe that one day, you'll be strong enough to protect everyone. Bakugo didn't meet his eyes, but his hand slowly unclenched as the silver medal was draped around his neck. Whatever, he muttered. And then, All Might turned to Izuku. For a moment, the world felt quiet again. Izuku stared up at his mentor, the man who had given him everything. The man who started his journey. Young Midoriya. All Might's voice softened, trembling slightly. You gave everything. Your mind, your body, your spirit, and you never stopped pushing forward. You showed the world what it means to go beyond. You fought not just with strength, but with heart. His hands gently placed the gold medal around Izuku's neck. I'm proud of you. Izuku's eyes shimmered, but he held back the tears, just barely. Thank you, All Might. All Might leaned in, lips just beside Izuku's ear. When this is all over, we need to talk. Alone. Izuku blinked. He knew what this meant. Whatever came next, whatever All Might had to say, would change things. Forever. He nodded. I understand. The crowd roars. The trio turned to face the audience. The cheers swelled again. Parents, heroes, students, strangers. All of them screaming their support, their awe, their hope. Ochako was crying from the stands, wiping away tears of joy and pride. Iida clapped with military precision. Hiroshima howled Bakugo's name. Even Aizawa's eyes were just a little softer than usual. Present Mike nearly choked up. There you have it, folks. What a journey, what a festival. These are the heroes of tomorrow. The sun dipped lower, the shadows stretched, but the stage glowed bright, basking in victory. After the spotlight, as the crowd slowly dispersed, the boys descended the stage. Bakugo stormed ahead silently, fists still clenched, his pride wounded but intact. Tokiyami offered Izuku a brief nod. An intense flame burns in you, Midoriya. I hope we fight again someday. Likewise, Izuku replied with a bow. Izuku then stared at his medal, gently brushing a thumb across the cool gold surface. First place, I really did it. His thoughts briefly flickered to everyone who supported him, his mom, his classmates, Ochako, Iida, and of course, All Might. But this isn't the end. This is only the beginning. He clutched the medal tightly. A storm was coming, and Izuku Midoriya, bruised and beaming, was ready. 2 days had passed since the UA Sports Festival, where the stadium had erupted in a cacophony of cheers, confetti, and seismic shockwaves. The bruises on Izuku Midoriya's body still bloomed a deep, mottled purple, and the bandages wrapping his arms and torso remained taut, a second skin against the raw ache beneath. His head still thrummed with the phantom roar of the crowd, thousands of voices chanting his name, a sound both exhilarating and overwhelming. Yet here, at Dagoba Beach, the world was quieter. The only sounds were the rhythmic hush and pull of gentle waves lapping at the shore and the distant, mournful cries of gulls wheeling against a boundless sky. Most people came to Dagoba for the salt-kissed breeze, the endless stretch of blue where sea met horizon, or the way the sunlight danced like scattered diamonds across the water. Izuku loved it for a different reason. He had earned it. Every grain of sand, every smooth stone polished by the tide, stood as a testament to what a single pair of hands, calloused, trembling, but unrelenting, could achieve. Months ago, this beach had been a graveyard of rust and refuse, a forgotten scar on the coastline. Now, it was clean, reborn through his stubborn will and the guidance of a hero who saw something in a quirkless boy that no one else had. Izuku sat on a weathered drift log half buried at the waterline, his shoes discarded beside him, toes curling into the cool, damp sand. His arms, still swathed in white gauze where the Kaioken technique had torn muscle and the Kamehameha's recoil had seared skin, rested limply on his knees. The pain was a dull pulse, a reminder of the price he'd paid to stand tall in the arena. His green eyes, bright yet shadowed with fatigue, traced the horizon where sky and ocean blurred into one. His mind drifted like foam skimming the surface of the waves, caught between triumph and the weight of secrets he wasn't ready to share. Footsteps crunched softly behind him, light, careful, slightly uneven, as if their owner moved with deliberate care. Izuku didn't turn. Somehow, he already knew who it was. The air seemed to shift, carrying a familiar warmth, a presence that had anchored him through every trial. A small, gaunt shadow fell across the sand at the edge of his vision. All Might, Toshinori Yagi in his true form, frail and hollow-cheeked, yet still radiating that unshakable, broad smile, eased himself onto the log beside his pupil. The symbol of peace, stripped of his invincible facade, was no less a hero in Izuku's eyes. The sight of him, so human yet so enduring, stirred a quiet ache in Izuku's chest, a mix of gratitude, awe, and something deeper, unspoken. For a long while, neither spoke. The waves rolled in, retreated, and rolled again, their cadence a steady heartbeat beneath the silence. A gull cried overhead, its wings cutting sharp arcs against the pale afternoon sky. The salt air was cool, tinged with the faint tang of seaweed and freedom. All Might closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, as if savoring a memory long buried. "I haven't been down to the coast in years," he said, his voice soft but resonant, carrying the weight of a man who had seen too much yet still found wonder in the small things. "It's nice to remember the world is bigger than stadiums and battles." Izuku managed a faint smile, his lips twitching upward, but he said nothing. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where the sea shimmered like liquid light. All Might's sharp, fatherly eyes, blue as the ocean before them, shifted to the bandages crisscrossing Izuku's arms. "How are the injuries, young Midoriya?" His tone was gentle, but there was a thread of concern woven through it, the kind only someone who had borne similar wounds could muster. Izuku flexed his fingers, wincing as pain flickered through his muscles like a spark chasing a fuse. He nodded, his voice steady despite the ache. "They'll heal." A soft chuckle escaped All Might, warm and teasing, like a breeze ruffling the waves. "You said that about the sports festival obstacles, and the entrance exam, and that mess with the sludge villain." The humor faded, replaced by a quiet sincerity that seemed to anchor the air between them. "I meant what I said back there, and I'll say it again. I'm proud of you, young Midoriya. You carried yourself like a true hero out there. Not just in strength, but in spirit." Izuku's heart swelled, a warmth spreading through his chest, yet it tightened too, caught in the tangle of gratitude and doubt. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Thank you, sir," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. All Might laced his thin fingers together, his hands resting on his knees like an old man settling into a familiar story. But, his voice grew careful, measured, as if treading on sacred ground. "I have to admit, you surprised me out there. That scarlet aura, Kaioken, you called it. And that, Kamehameha, the sudden spikes in power. Those weren't part of One for All." His eyes, keen despite the shadows beneath them, studied Izuku with a mix of curiosity and trust. "Where did you learn them?" Izuku's gaze drifted back to the horizon, where the sun painted the sea in hues of gold and amber. The question hung between them, heavy as the tide. He drew a slow, steadying breath, the salt air sharp in his lungs. "I found something," he said at last, his voice low, almost lost in the sound of the waves. "A notebook. My father's." The word father caught in his throat, a jagged edge that cut deeper than he expected. "It turns out there's more to me than I knew. Techniques, instincts, things that feel older than my own memories, like they've been waiting for me to catch up." All Might's brows knitted together, his expression softening with understanding. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, giving Izuku the space to continue, or to stop. I see, he said simply, his voice a quiet anchor. Izuku's hands trembled faintly, the bandages rustling as he clenched his fists. I want to tell you, All Might. Truly, I do, but, he exhaled, his breath shuddering, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm not ready, not yet. It's big, bigger than me, maybe. And I'm still figuring out what it all means. The silence that followed was gentle, unbroken by judgment. All Might regarded him for a long moment, his eyes soft with the wisdom of someone who had carried secrets of his own. Then, with a tenderness that made Izuku's chest ache, he placed a bony hand on Izuku's messy green hair, ruffling it with a fondness that felt like home. Some secrets need time to ripen, All Might said, his voice steady and warm. When you're ready, whether it's tomorrow or years from now, I'll be here to listen. He pushed himself to his feet, joints creaking like the weathered wood beneath them, and offered a final, radiant smile. Until then, remember this, whatever that power is, it chose you. And so did One for All. I believe in your heart to guide them both. Izuku looked up, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears, reflecting the sea's glow. Thank you, All Might, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. All Might's smile softened, a beacon in the fading light. Rest when you can, young Midoriya. Train when you must. He turned, his boots crunching softly against the sand, and began to walk down the beach. His frail silhouette grew smaller with each step, blending into the haze of salt and sunlight, until he was little more than a lone gull drifting over the waves. Izuku remained on the drift log for several minutes after All Might vanished from sight, letting his mentor's words sink into him like seawater soaking into the sand. The weight of them was both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder of the trust placed in him and the mysteries he still carried. The ocean stretched before him, vast and unyielding, its depths hiding secrets as surely as his own heart did. Beneath his skin, a familiar itch stirred, a quiet drumbeat that had grown louder since the sports festival, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Get stronger. It was more than a thought. It was a call, a primal urge that thrummed in his blood, as undeniable as the tide. He rose, shrugging off his jacket and letting it fall to the sand beside his shoes. His bare feet carried him closer to the shoreline, where the sand was firm and cool, packed tight by the endless caress of the waves. The bandages tugged at his skin as he raised his fists, pain flaring like a warning. But pain was a whisper compared to the roaring call within him, the voice that had pushed him through the chaos of the festival, through the fire and fury of Bakugo's explosions, through the searing strain of Kaioken. He jabbed at the empty air, once, twice, each punch cracking like a whip. His muscles protested, the raw ache in his arms flaring with every motion, but he pressed on, welcoming the burn. He pivoted, unleashing a side kick that sliced through the air, his toes digging into the sand for balance. The strain was a fire in his limbs, but it was a fire he knew, one he had kindled himself. A faint flicker of ki sparked around his fists, soft and controlled, a glow that danced like embers in the fading light. He kept it low, deliberate, this was about form, not force. Yet each strike sent faint ripples through the air, grains of sand puffing up at the impact, as if the earth itself acknowledged his effort. The salt wind stung his cuts, sharp and bracing. Sweat beaded on his brow, trickling into his eyes, mingling with the sea's bite. That Saiyan instinct, the one he hadn't yet named to All Might, howled within him, more. Higher. Beyond. It was the same voice that had urged him into Kaioken when his body screamed to stop, the same voice that had laughed in the face of Bakugo's firestorm, daring him to push past his limits. It was wild, untamed, yet it felt like a part of him, as intrinsic as his freckles or his dreams of heroism. Izuku chuckled between breaths, a soft, breathless sound that mingled with the waves. Yeah, I know, he murmured to that inner voice. We're just getting started. He flowed into a combination. Block, slip, uppercut, his feet carving shallow arcs in the sand he had once cleansed of trash. Each movement etched new meaning into this reclaimed ground, a silent vow to the boy who had hauled rusted refrigerators and shattered tires, who had believed in a dream bigger than himself. The pain radiated outward, a pulsing heat that spread from his arms to his chest, but the salt wind cooled it, and the waves seemed to roar their applause. He moved faster now, his body finding a rhythm despite the strain. A low kick, a spinning backfist, a crescent arc of ki that skimmed the sand and sent a spray of grains glittering into the air. His breaths came sharp and steady, each exhale a release, each inhale a promise. The beach stretched wide around him, empty yet alive, a canvas for his resolve. At last, he slowed, his chest heaving, his arms throbbing but his spirit alight. He lowered his stance, pressing his palms together in a gesture that felt both sacred and instinctive, as if honoring something ancient within him. The tide lapped at his toes, cool and gentle, grounding him to the earth. "For Dad," he whispered, the word soft but fierce. "For Mom. For everyone." The horizon glowed as the sun began its descent, painting the sea in hues of fire and rose, a canvas of fleeting beauty. Izuku smiled into the wind, his heart steady despite the ache in his body. The world was wide, vast as the ocean before him, and he would meet it, not as a boy trembling under the weight of his dreams, but as a hero forging his own path. With that oath burning in his chest, he bent to retrieve his shoes, slinging his jacket over one shoulder. He turned and walked along the shore, his footprints trailing behind him in the sand. The waves reached for them, lapping gently, but they could not quite erase the marks he left behind. Dagoba Beach lay hushed beneath a pallid dawn, its quiet swells breathing softly against the sand. Shy gulls wheeled overhead, their plaintive cries weaving through the cool, salt-kissed air. Only 2 weeks prior, these same sands had trembled under Izuku Midoriya's breathless training sessions, where his wild Kamehameha blasts had turned the tide into geysers of foam and spray, scattering light like prisms. The beach had been his proving ground, a place where he had pushed his body and spirit to their limits, Saiyan instincts roaring in harmony with one for all. But on this morning, the world exhaled in pastel stillness, as if granting him a moment to simply be. Izuku walked barefoot along the shoreline, his toes sinking into the cool, damp sand. The early breeze brushed against the fading bandage lines on his forearms, where the strain of Kaioken and the recoil of Kamehameha had left their marks. School would resume in 3 days, its demands and challenges looming like the city skyline in the distance. But here, at Dagoba, the murmurs of Musudafu felt 100 miles away, drowned out by the rhythmic pulse of the waves. He carried no training weights, no hero notebook scrawled with meticulous observations, just a small trowel tucked into his belt and a canvas pouch filled with nutrient-rich soil slung over his shoulder. His destination lay beyond a low dune, where salt grass bowed gracefully beneath the wind, whispering secrets to the sea. There, nestled in a sheltered hollow, was his tiny rectangle of earth, a humble garden plot fenced by smooth stones and glinting shards of sea glass, polished to jewels by the tide. The Senzu bean patch. Izuku knelt before the modest square of soil, his pulse quickening with a quiet anticipation. The dawn light, soft and pale, bathed the patch in a gentle glow, and he leaned closer, his green eyes searching for the fragile shoot he had planted weeks ago under the weight of hope and uncertainty. At first, he saw only grains of sand, flecks of shell, and the faint shimmer of dew. Then, like a whisper of life against the vastness of the beach, he spotted it, a single, stubborn stem, no longer than his pinky, crowned with 2 heart-shaped leaves lifted like prayerful palms toward the rising sun. It was impossibly green, a defiant spark of vitality in the barren expanse. A grin spread across Izuku's face, so wide it tugged at the bruises still healing on his cheeks, a dull ache he barely noticed. His heart swelled, the joy as bright and sharp as the sunlight glinting off the waves. "You made it," he whispered, his voice soft but trembling with awe. He brushed away stray pebbles with careful fingers, his movements reverent, as if tending to something sacred. His heart thumped with the same electric thrill he felt when one for all surged through his veins or when his Saiyan instincts flared, urging him to leap beyond his limits. But this was different, gentler, more delicate. This was hope measured in centimeters, not shockwaves. This was life, fragile and tenacious, entrusted to his care. Izuku opened the canvas pouch and scooped out a handful of dark, nutrient-rich soil, its earthy scent mingling with the salt of the sea. He sprinkled it lightly around the stem, his hands steady despite the faint ache in his arms. Then he closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the cool, briny air fill his lungs. He reached inward, drawing a subtle thread of ki from his core, a warmth that tingled through his veins, familiar yet always astonishing. His fingertips glowed faintly, a soft scarlet hue that flickered like a candle in the dawn. A breath in balance. A breath-out release. The ki flowed like groundwater, not as a blast but as a nourishing current, diffusing into the dirt with a tenderness that felt almost sacred. Izuku pictured the energy seeping into the sprout's microscopic roots, urging them downward, outward, stronger. He imagined it weaving through the soil, coaxing life to take hold, to endure. The sprout quivered, its stem thickening by the barest fraction, one leaf unfurling just a touch more, its jade surface catching the dawn's first golden rays. The change was small, almost imperceptible, but to Izuku, it was a thunderclap in his chest, a quiet triumph that echoed louder than any stadium cheer. Progress. He sat back on his heels, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand, surprised to find tears glistening there. They weren't tears of sadness, but of something deeper, a gratitude for this small miracle, a hope that felt too big for words. "Just a little today," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll grow together." Izuku lingered by the patch, his thoughts drifting like the waves lapping at the shore. He remembered why he had risked cultivating something so rare, so precious. A single senzu beam could knit broken bones, restore drained strength, or pull someone back from the brink of collapse, a miracle contained in a humble, green pod. He had read about them in his father's notebook, those cryptic pages filled with techniques and secrets that seemed to hum with a life of their own. The beams were more than a tool. They were a promise, a way to protect those he loved when all other options failed. He pictured All Might, his mentor's frail form coughing out blood that he tried to hide, his indomitable smile faltering under the weight of old wounds. He saw Recovery Girl, her stern face softening with worry as she shook her head over injuries too severe for her quirk to mend. He thought of his classmates, Ochako's determined grin, Ida's steady resolve, Todoroki's quiet strength limping through exhaustion after battles that pushed them beyond their limits. And he saw his mother, Inko, standing in their small kitchen, her hands trembling as she chopped vegetables, her eyes shadowed with worry for her son's reckless heart. If a day ever came when their strength faltered, when no healing machine or support item could bridge the gap between despair and survival, if that day came, this humble plant might turn fear into hope. One beam could mean the difference between a hero falling and rising again. One beam could mean a mother's smile instead of tears. Izuku pressed 2 fingers to the soil, the cool earth grounding him. "One for Mom," he said softly, his voice steady with resolve. "One for All Might, and maybe one to keep, just in case life surprises us." A quiet chuckle escaped him, warm and bittersweet. Life loves its surprises. A gull cried overhead, its wings slicing through the air as it soared toward the horizon. Izuku looked up, shielding his face from a shaft of sunlight that lanced through the clouds, painting the sea in hues of rose and gold. The world was always moving forward, relentless as the tide. Waves kept rolling, carving new paths through the sand. Seeds kept growing, reaching for light despite the odds. And Izuku, too, would keep moving, driven by a heart that refused to stand still. His Saiyan blood hummed beneath his skin, a quiet pulse of energy that yearned for new heights, for battles that would test his limits. But today, it rested, content in this moment of stillness. Not every victory needed shockwaves or blazing auras. Sometimes, victory looked like a fragile sprout surviving the dawn, its roots sinking deeper into the earth with each passing day. Izuku stood, brushing sand from his knees, the grains clinging stubbornly to his skin. He bowed to the small garden, a gesture that felt both instinctive and profound, like a monk paying respect to a shrine. "I'll bring water at dusk," he promised, his voice soft but firm, a vow to the sprout and to himself. He turned back toward the shoreline, his shoes dangling from one hand, the other curling into a loose fist that thrummed with silent joy. Each step left a fleeting print in the wet sand, quickly kissed away by the waves, a reminder that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could ripple outward, unseen but powerful. The ocean stretched before him, vast and unyielding, its depths hiding secrets as surely as his own heart did. Yet it was also a mirror, reflecting the endless possibilities of the horizon. The sun climbed higher, its light spilling across the sea in a cascade of fire and rose. Beyond that horizon awaited classes, internships, and villains yet unknown challenges that would demand every ounce of his strength, his courage, his heart. But Izuku would meet them, not as the quirkless boy who once stood trembling on this same beach, but as a hero forging his own path, guided by the legacy of One for All and the fire of his Saiyan heritage. Strength, he realized, wasn't measured only by power levels or tournament titles. It wasn't just the ability to shatter stone or outrun explosions. Strength lived in caring for fragile things, in tending a single sprout, in protecting a smile, in believing in a future where hope could take root. It lived in the quiet moments, the ones no one cheered for, but that shaped a hero's soul. Izuku Midoriya turned toward the city, the sports festival medal tucked beneath his shirt, its cool weight a reminder of how far he had come. He warmed his chest, a steady ember of resolve, and in his pocket, he carried a single grain of hope, tiny, green, and growing. As he walked, the waves sang behind him, their song a promise that the world was wide, and he was ready to meet it. The city of Musudafu hummed with the pulse of early morning, its streets alive with the chatter of commuters and the distant rumble of trains. The air was crisp, tinged with the faint bite of autumn, and the sky stretched above in a pale blue canvas, streaked with wisps of cloud that caught the sunrise's amber glow. Izuku Midoriya walked along the familiar path to UA High School, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his shoes scuffing softly against the pavement. The bandages on his forearms had been replaced with lighter wraps, the bruises from the sports festival fading but still tender. His heart, however, thrummed with a quiet excitement. School was resuming, and with it came the promise of new challenges, new growth, and the weight of expectations that followed his performance at the festival. 2 weeks had passed since Dagoba Beach, where he had tended to the fragile senzu bean sprout, its tiny green leaves a symbol of hope amidst the chaos of his evolving powers. The memory of that dawn lingered in his chest, a steady warmth that grounded him as he navigated the city's bustle. But today, his thoughts were heavier, tangled with the echoes of his father's notebook and the cryptic legacy of Hisashi Midoriya, Goza, a name that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. The Saiyan blood in his veins hummed softly, a reminder of the fire within him, but he pushed it down, focusing on the rhythm of his steps. As he rounded a corner, the familiar sight of UA's towering gates came into view, gleaming in the morning light. But before he could quicken his pace, a figure caught his eye, a tall, rigid silhouette standing at the crosswalk, glasses glinting as he adjusted them with mechanical precision. Tenya Iida. Izuku's heart clenched. He hadn't seen Iida since the news of Tensai's attack by the hero killer, Stain, had rippled through their class group chat. The messages had been sparse, respectful, giving Iida space to process the blow. Izuku slowed his steps, his instinct to rush forward tempered by the weight of his friend's grief. Iida stood straight as always, his blazer immaculate, but there was a stiffness in his posture, a shadow in his usually sharp eyes that made him seem smaller, more human. Iida, Izuku called, his voice softer than he intended, carrying a warmth he hoped would reach his friend. Iida turned, his expression flickering with surprise before settling into a strained smile. Midoriya, he said, his voice clipped but polite. Good morning. I trust you're prepared for the return to classes. Izuku nodded, falling into step beside him as they crossed the street toward UA's entrance. Yeah, I'm ready, but, how about you? How are you holding up? The question was gentle, tentative, but it hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Iida's steps faltered for a fraction of a second, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. I am managing, he said, his tone measured, as if each word were a carefully placed brick in a crumbling wall. My brother is stable, thanks to the medical team. But his recovery will be long. His legs, he trailed off, his gaze dropping to the pavement, where the morning light cast their shadows in sharp relief. Izuku's chest ached. He remembered Tensai Iida, Ingenium, smiling broadly in old news clips, a hero who moved like a comet, swift and selfless. The thought of him confined to a hospital bed, his quirk silenced by Stain's blade, was a wound that cut deeper than any Izuku had sustained in the festival. He wanted to say something profound, something that could lift the weight from Iida's shoulders, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he reached out, placing a hand on Iida's arm, his touch light but firm. Iida, he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat, Tensai's strong. And so are you. He'd believe in you, you know, believe you'll carry on what he started. You're not alone in this. Iida's eyes widened, a flicker of emotion breaking through his stoic facade. For a moment, he looked like he might protest, but then he exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. Thank you, Midoriya, he said quietly, his voice raw. But it was as if Iida wanted to say more, but he stopped and instead showed Izuku a smile. Izuku's heart warmed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're going to be an amazing hero, Iida. You always have been." The words echoed a conversation they'd had before, one where Izuku had reassured Iida of his potential, and he felt the truth of it now more than ever. They walked in companionable silence toward the school gates, the weight of their shared resolve settling between them like a promise. The UA campus loomed ahead, its glass walls gleaming like a beacon, and Izuku felt a spark of anticipation. Today wasn't just about returning to class, it was about taking the next step toward becoming the heroes they dreamed of being. The classroom buzzed with energy as Class 1A settled into their seats, the air thick with chatter and nervous excitement. The sports festival had thrust them into the spotlight, and today, they would learn the results, the internship offers from pro heroes across Japan. Aizawa stood at the front of the room, his usual tired expression softened by a rare glint of pride in his eyes. "Settle down," Aizawa said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "The sports festival showcased your potential, and the pros took notice. Some of you received more offers than others, but don't let the numbers define you. Focus on what you can learn from the experience." He tapped a tablet, and a holographic screen flickered to life, displaying a list of names and numbers. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room as the students scanned the rankings. Todoroki's name was near the top, with 4,123 offers, a testament to his raw power and composed performance. Bakugo followed closely with 3,556, his explosive display clearly leaving an impression. But at the very top, with a staggering 5,247 offers, was Izuku Midoriya. The room erupted in a mix of cheers and stunned whispers. Ochako clapped her hands, her eyes sparkling. "Izuku, that's incredible," she exclaimed. Kirishima grinned, giving him a thumbs up. "Manly as hell, Midoriya." Even Bakugo, though his scowl deepened, gave a grudging nod, his pride stung but his respect undeniable. Izuku's face flushed, his heart pounding as he stared at the number. 5,000 offers. It was more than he'd ever imagined, a tidal wave of recognition that both thrilled and terrified him. He thought of the scarlet aura of Kaioken, the Kamehameha that had shaken the stadium, and the fire in his blood that had carried him through. Those weren't just one for all. They were something more, something tied to his father, Goza. The weight of that legacy pressed against his chest, a reminder that his journey was only beginning. Aizawa raised a hand, silencing the room. "Offers are just the start," he said. "Today, you'll choose something equally important, your hero names. This is your chance to define who you'll be as heroes. Take it seriously." The class fell into a hushed anticipation as Aizawa handed out small whiteboards and markers. Izuku gripped his marker, his mind racing. A hero name wasn't just a title, it was a declaration, a vow to the world and to himself. He thought of All Might, the symbol of peace, whose name carried hope and strength. He thought of his mother, Inko, whose quiet courage had shaped him. And he thought of his father, Hisashi, Goza, a man whose shadow loomed larger with every page of that notebook, every pulse of Saiyan instinct in his veins. Izuku closed his eyes, the marker trembling in his hand. He wanted a name that captured his heart. Brave, selfless, courageous, a name that spoke of someone who would throw himself into danger for those he cherished. He saw flashes of his journey, hauling trash at Dagoba Beach, shielding All Might from the Nomu, tending the Senzu bean sprout with careful hands. He saw himself standing against Bakugo's firestorm, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. And he felt the fire of Goza's legacy, a strength that burned not for destruction, but for protection. His pen moved across the whiteboard, the letters forming with a quiet certainty. When Aizawa called his name, Izuku stood, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his chest. "Midoriya," Aizawa said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Your hero name." Izuku held up his whiteboard, the words written in bold, clear strokes, "Valiant." "The hero. Valiant," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "It means, someone who faces any challenge with courage, who puts their body and heart on the line for others, no matter the cost. It's who I want to be, for my friends, my family, and everyone who needs me." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling over the class. Then Ochako beamed, her hands clasped together. That's so you, Izuku. She said, her voice bright. Ida's eyes softened, a faint smile breaking through his grief. A fitting choice, Midoriya, he said quietly. Even Aizawa gave a rare nod of approval, his lips twitching upward. As the other students presented their names, Uravity for Ochako, Red Riot for Kirishima and so on, Izuku sat back down, his heart full. Valiant felt right, like a piece of himself slotting into place. It wasn't just about One for All or his Saiyan blood, it was about the boy who had dreamed of heroism long before he had power, who had tended a fragile sprout and believed in a future where hope could grow. The rest of the day passed in a blur of lessons and discussions about internship placements. Izuku's mind wandered, lingering on the name Valiant and the man who had unknowingly shaped it. Hisashi Goza, a Saiyan who left techniques within his notebook with a language only Izuku understood, pulsed through Izuku's veins, whose notebook had unlocked a power he was only beginning to understand. He wondered what his father would think of him now, a boy with 5,247 offers, a hero name that carried his heart, and a tiny garden patch that held his hopes. As the final bell rang, Izuku walked out of UA with Ida and Ochako, the trio's footsteps echoing in the courtyard. The sunset painted the sky in hues of fire and rose, a mirror to the horizon he'd seen at Dagoba. Ida's expression was lighter now, his resolve strengthened by their earlier talk. Ochako chattered about her internship options, her enthusiasm infectious. Izuku, you're gonna have to tell us how you pick from all those offers. She said, nudging his arm playfully. Izuku laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. I'll figure it out, I just want to learn as much as I can, to be the best hero I can be. Ida adjusted his glasses, his voice steady. And you will, Midoriya. Valiant, it suits you. Izuku smiled, his heart warm with the weight of their trust. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with villains, challenges, and the mystery of his father's legacy. But he would meet it, not as a boy trembling under the weight of his dreams, but as Valiant, a hero who carried hope like a seed, ready to grow. As they parted ways, Izuku glanced back at UA's gates, the sunset casting long shadows across the pavement. In his pocket, he felt the faint weight of a single grain of hope, the memory of a green sprout reaching for the dawn. And in his chest, the fire of Goza's blood burned steady, a promise that he would rise, again and again, for those he cherished. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and please hype this video. Now we will see you in the next video.